Chapter 1622. The announcement of the roasted pig's eyes was a good topic for the customers lining up in front of Amy's. There were even people arguing about whether the pig's eyes should be skewered and roasted or placed directly on a fine mesh grill. But arguments were just arguments. Because the name of the dish was too direct and brutal, not many people showed any desire to try it. Of course, more people were eager to try the dish that someone else had ordered. Whoever dared to be the first warrior would definitely be the center of attention. "Father, why aren't we eating roasted pig's eyes tonight?" Amy looked at the table full of dishes and asked Meg in confusion. "Because only the two of us want to eat it now. If we serve it to the table, it might affect other people's appetites. So, Amy, I'll roast another skewer for you after the restaurant opens, okay?" Meg said with a smile. Amy was probably the only one who would unconditionally believe that everything he cooked was delicious and show an unusual interest in it. "Okay." Amy nodded happily and stuck out 2 fingers. "I want 2 skewers." "Okay, 2 skewers." Meg nodded with a smile and put a piece of red braised pork in her bowl. "Thank you." Amy bit off half of the meat and chewed happily. Then, she ate a big mouthful of rice. She looked cute and appetizing. What a scene of a loving father and a filial daughter. Angela ate her rice and looked at this scene enviously. Speaking of which, she hadn't eaten at the same table with so many people she knew in a long time. It was a very strange feeling. Then, her gaze landed on Irina. She was eating her fried rice in small bites. Her body seemed to be emitting a soft golden glow. She was so elegant and beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off her. "What's wrong?" Irina asked with a smile as she raised her head and met Angela's eyes. "No, nothing." Angela blushed and quickly lowered her head to eat. Even the tips of her ears were red. "But I heard them talking at the door just now. They seemed to be a little afraid of roasted pig's eyes. I wonder if any customers will order it." Mia was a little worried. Although she had unlimited confidence in Meg, the roasted pig's eyes were still a little too violent. She wondered how many people would still have the courage to try it after seeing the name of the dish. "Why don't you give it a better name?" Irina put down her spoon and suggested to Meg, for example, Bloody Eye or Demon's Eyes. "This name doesn't sound better at all, okay?" Meg rolled his eyes. What kind of dish name was this? "Where's the exploding eye?" Amy raised her hand. "This." Meg pondered. "The window to the roasted pig's soul," Anna suggested. "What a gentle name." Meg gave Anna a thumbs up. The first gathering after Angela joined them ended in a warm and friendly atmosphere. "Welcome, Amy's." Meg opened the restaurant's door and welcomed the customers with a smile. Angela stood in the corner and watched the customers enter the restaurant one after another. Although she had worked as a very amateur service staff for 2 days on Carapace Island, she still felt a little nervous and expectant as she stood here. Although this brand new job wasn't what she wanted in life, it was a good start in Chaos City. "You don't have to do anything today. Just get to know the restaurant's operations from an employee's perspective," Meg said to Angela with a smile as he walked past her on his way to the kitchen. "Millimeter. Angela nodded and stood sideways behind the counter. "Big sister Angela, don't be nervous. You'll be even more nervous when you do it yourself," Amy consoled her with a smile as she placed Ugly Duckling's head under her chin. "Millimeter." Angela nodded. She couldn't accept such consolation. "Let's sit here." Vanessa and the rest sat at the last table near the kitchen. They could see some of the scenes in the kitchen through the glass display window from here. "There's no private room." Sean looked around. There was only one transparent hall in this restaurant. Although the wooden railings made a simple separation, it couldn't completely block out the view and sound. He was not used to having dinner with a group of complete strangers, and there were even orcs and demons among them. "Amy's doesn't need a private room. Everyone has to share a table." Vanessa shook her head with a smile. She couldn't wait to pick up the menu on the table. After flipping it open, there was indeed a new dish under the beef kebab. Roasted pig's eyes, 300 copper coins per kebab. It was a pity that there wasn't a picture of this roasted pig's eyes. However, this made her feel a little lucky. If she saw pig's eyes staring at her when she flipped open the menu, She probably wouldn't have any appetite for the day. This is really a new dish that I'm looking forward to. I wonder which brave warrior will be brave enough to step forward and give it a try, Abraham said with a smile. There was a hint of anticipation in his smile. I think this brave warrior is in front of us now. Vanessa turned the menu around and pushed it in front of Sean, who was sitting opposite her. She smiled and said, "Big brother Sean, I'll order a set of roasted pig's eyes for you. You have to eat something different when you're in Chaos City." I don't really want to eat that," Sean said with an awkward expression. Even someone like him who could shoot a wild boar's eyeball out with a look couldn't accept this so-called roasted pig's eyes. "No, you promised me just now. You said you would agree to all my requests today." Vanessa shook her head with a pout. Then, she pointed at the roasted pig's eyes on the menu with a pale finger, and said, "My request is very simple. You can eat a skewer of roasted pig's eyes." Sean opened his mouth. He felt as if he had fallen into this little kitten's trap. He didn't expect her to come up with such a way to take revenge on him. "I heard it. I can testify." Abraham raised his hand to show that he wasn't afraid of blowing things up. Sean looked at the expectant Vanessa and the smiling Abraham, and nodded helplessly. "All right. Hee. I knew Big Brother Sean is the best," Vanessa said happily. The customers ordered their dishes one after another, but they seemed to have reached a consensus. They avoided ordering the roasted pig's eyes, and were all waiting for a brave warrior to jump out and be the first to eat the roasted pig's eyes. Hence, when Yarbemia came to Vanessa's table, no one had ordered a skewer of roasted pig's eyes yet. "What would you like to order?" Yarbemia asked with a smile. "Big sister MIA, we'd like a skewer of roasted pig's eyes," Vanessa said eagerly. "Roasted pig's eyes?" Yarbemia looked at Vanessa in shock. The customers also looked over curiously. They wanted to see which brave warrior ordered the roasted pig's eyes and took an important step in the culinary world. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1623. Yes, a skewer of roasted pig's eyes. Vanessa nodded with a smile. Xiao Ian's lips twitched, but he held himself back and didn't refuse. He was, after all, a great general who had been on the battlefield. How could he be intimidated by a skewer of roasted pig's eyes? His royal father had sent him to Chaos City with the most important purpose of bringing Vanessa home. If he didn't complete this mission, he would have failed the mission no matter how well he did. "All right, please hold on for a moment." MIA nodded, and continued to order other dishes before walking to the kitchen. "So it's that insanely spicy lady. A warrior who dares to face insanely spicy is indeed extraordinary." Everyone looked at Vanessa. During this period, Vanessa, Abraham, and the rest were very active in the designated hot pot area, and had gained some fame among the customers for ordering insanely spicy dishes. After all, the insanely spicy was not only a test of one's mouth and stomach, but also one's anus. This kind of insanely spicy, or even double or triple the insanely spicy, was not something that ordinary people could accept. However, they didn't expect her to be the first to order the roasted pig's eyes that everyone was afraid of. "Uncle, aren't you very interested in this new dish? Why don't you order a skewer and try it?" Vanessa asked Abraham strangely. "There's no hurry. Since you've already ordered it, let Sean try the poison first," Abraham said with a chuckle. "Sean? That's not a bad idea." Vanessa nodded with a sly smile. "Since you're rushing me home, I'll let you eat something that will leave a lasting impression on you." "Boss, Miss Vanessa's table ordered a set of roasted pig's eyes. Other than that, no one else ordered it," MIA said to Meg after entering the kitchen. That's good. At least someone ordered it, right?" Meg said with a smile. He looked up at Vanessa and the rest who were sitting at the table facing the window. His gaze paused on Sean for a while, and his lips curled up slightly. He quickly shifted his gaze away, and continued to stir the wok in his hands. "That's true." MIA nodded. 10 plates of Yangju fried rice. Meg shook the big spoon and filled up the plates on the side in the blink of an eye. He signaled Barbara, who was standing at the side, to serve the dishes. "How long do I have to wait?" Sean glanced at the restaurant that was full of people. They were at the last table. If the dishes were served according to the order, it would probably take a long time. There's no need for that. Mr. Mack is a fast cook, Vanessa said confidently as she turned to look in the direction of the kitchen. Sean raised his head and glanced in the direction of the kitchen. From his position, he could see a lot of space in the kitchen through the transparent display window. The bright kitchen area was not small. Although there were many things placed in it, it did not look messy at all. A somewhat familiar figure wandered between different kitchen utensils, skillfully controlling the entire kitchen and constantly sending out delicacies. The most eye-catching thing was the grill that was almost directly in front of him. The charcoal fire was already burning, but there were no ingredients on it yet. Don't tell me the pig's eyes are being grilled here. Sean frowned slightly. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Before he could retract his gaze, Meg had already walked over with a transparent crystal basin. In the crystal basin, there were huge pig's eyes piled up densely. Even though he was used to seeing bloody scenes on the battlefield, he still felt his scalp tingle. He's here with the pig's eyes. Abraham, on the other hand, craned his neck with great interest. For an excellent foodie, he had to have enough curiosity and a keen sense of smell when it came to unusual ingredients. He could wait for a while, but he had to maintain enough attention and not let himself miss any of the delicacies. Really? Vanessa covered her face with her hands. Then, she slowly turned her head and peeked through the gaps between her fingers. She immediately turned her head back, and her expression changed slightly. Wow, that's so scary. They're really huge eyeballs. Laura, who was sitting beside her, trembled. She did not dare to turn around to look. It's just pig's eyes. There's nothing to worry about. Sean coughed dryly, and waved his hand with a calm expression. Brother Sean is such a brave person. He actually dares to watch Mr. Mack grill pig's eyes, Vanessa said with admiration. Sean, who was about to look away, froze. His Adam's apple moved, and he could only continue to put on a calm expression. He watched the man in the display window reach out and pick up an eyeball from the crystal basin. Then, he deftly pierced it with a bamboo skewer. He repeated the process a few times, and a string of pig's eyes with 5 eyeballs was pierced. The eyeballs were dug out from the roots, and there were still traces of blood in them. The eyeballs were clear, and they looked very fresh. They should have been dug out not long ago. After being pierced into a string, they looked even more strange. It was as if he was being stared at by multiple eyes, and it made him feel a little uncomfortable. Meg saw Sean's expression change from the corner of his eye. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he twirled the string of pig's eyes on his fingertips. He first put it on the grill, then quickly pierced 2 more skewers, and put them on the grill at the same time with a small fire. A qualified string of roasted pig's eyes had to be roasted slowly on the grill for 20 minutes. It was a test of patience and one's control of the fire. Sitting in front of the grill and watching the entire process was also a test of the diner's psychological endurance. After all, this kind of scene was indeed not so simple. The game of eye to eye had officially begun. Many customers who were close to the display window couldn't help but look out of curiosity. Many of them immediately retracted their gazes, indicating that they couldn't accept it. There were also a few customers who had strong tastes who stared at Meg curiously. They wanted to see how Meg was going to roast these seemingly terrifying pig's eyes. The pig's eyes were placed on the grill that had been preheated for a while. The subcutaneous fat on the surface of the pig's eyes started to sizzle, and the round eyeballs started to gradually change shape and color. This was a very slow process. If one wanted to see this change clearly, they would have to look at the dead pig's eyes and stare at them seriously. In order to maintain his image as an iron-blooded soldier and a brave older brother, Sean looked at the process of Meg roasting the pig's eyes with a happy expression. His pupils gradually dilated, and his gaze landed on Meg more often. He had seen this chef once at the palace banquet. When he stood in the kitchen, he did indeed give off the feeling of a victorious general standing on the battlefield. He had only seen this kind of aura from that person before. Back then, he could only stand behind that person and watch him lead the border army to unbelievable victories one after another. It wasn't until that person disappeared and he took over that position that he gradually understood that this kind of aura wasn't something that could be possessed by standing in that position. He just didn't expect that a small chef could actually have such an aura. He didn't know if it was because the eyeballs were too impactful, or if it was something else, but he had this kind of illusion. Chapter 1624. Wow, the pig's eyes look really good. Big Sister Anna, do you want a skewer? Amy had run to the window and was standing on her tiptoes to look in. Her face was full of anticipation as she turned to look at Anna, who was standing behind her with Ugly Duckling in her arms. No. Anna shook her head firmly. She shrank her head and didn't dare to look into the window. How about Big Sister Angela? Do you want a skewer? Amy turned to look at Angela, who was standing behind the counter. I don't want one, either. Angela shook her head as well. Just hearing the name of roasted pig's eyes was enough to scare her, let alone trying it herself. All right, looks like I'm the only one who can enjoy such delicacies, Amy said regretfully. Little Amy wants to eat roasted pig's eyes too. Vanessa heard the conversation and couldn't help but turn to look at Amy in surprise. Yes, Father roasted 3 skewers. 2 of them are mine. Amy nodded, and then said, Then, did Big Sister Vanessa order the remaining skewer? Yes, but it's not for me. It's for my brother. Vanessa nodded with a smile and looked at Amy with admiration. Little Boss was really a brave little foodie. She even dared to try something as scary as roasted pig's eyes. That's such a pity. Father's roasted pig's eyes must be very delicious, but you ordered it for someone else, Amy said regretfully. This little girl, is she really not afraid at all? Sean looked at Amy in surprise. He still had some impression of this little girl. She was Crassus and Julian's precious disciple. It was just that he didn't see the 2 great magic casters in the restaurant today. Crassus should be negotiating with Brent and Elliot now. The triennial magic caster tournament of the Magus Tower was about to be held. As an important founder of the Magus Tower and the fixed opening of the magic caster tournament, the Magus Tower would definitely invite him to participate. Perhaps he could see this little girl again in Rodu. However, she was too young, so she probably wouldn't officially participate in the Great Magician Conference. After all, the youngest age group started from the age of 10. Little Boss, do you want to eat roasted pig's eyes? Many customers also heard Amy's words and couldn't help but cast concerned glances at her. As the #1 spokesperson for Amy's, as well as the #1 salesperson for new products, Amy's every taste test would drive the sales of a new product. This extraordinary appeal stemmed from her appetizing taste test performances, as well as the slogan that had gradually spread, "Follow the little boss and you won't step on any landmine." Therefore, Amy's decision to try the roasted pig's eyes meant that they had a chance to examine this new dish that sounded terrifying. Since Little Boss wants to test the poison himself, this should be a delicacy in terms of probability. But whether to try it or not, it's really hard to choose. Harrison rubbed his chin, feeling a little conflicted. Then, his gaze fell on the counter, and his eyes widened when he saw Angela standing behind the counter. Fuck, Mr. Mac is heartless. This fucking arrangement is made just like that. I don't have to do anything, and I can get paid handsomely. Instead, I'm willing to work as a receptionist. What kind of world is this? Harrison sniffed and felt that life wasn't as beautiful as it used to be. Even the beef kebab in his hand didn't smell good. Miss MIA, give me another glass of vodka. Harrison raised his hand and gestured. After a pause, he said, and give me 10 skewers of roasted pig's eyes. Wow, the surrounding customers all looked at him. This was a true warrior. Could it be that this roasted pig's eyes is also limited daily? Gyurge, who was sitting opposite him, was also a little confused. Although professionals like them had a lot of trust in Mr. Mac, when it came to such a controversial new product, they would still wait for a while to evaluate it before making a move. He didn't expect Harrison to act so quickly this time, and he couldn't help but feel a little suspicious. Yarbemia looked at Harrison with a little surprise. She didn't know what had triggered this chubby little brother who had always been carefree to order 10 skewers of roasted pig's eyes in one go. However, she still nodded very professionally and said, "All right, please wait a moment." Gyurge went forward with a sad face and said, "We were born from the same root. Why are you in such a hurry to torture each other? Get lost." Harrison rolled his eyes. "Why? Is there an inside story?" "Nothing. I just suddenly felt like eating something heavy to relieve my mood." Harrison shook his head slightly sadly. Gyurge was a little confused. He could only say, "All right, I'll see little boss try it first before deciding if I want to try this new product." Meg didn't forget to roast the pig's eyes and stir-fry the vegetables at the same time. Dish after dish was continuously brought out from the kitchen. The pig's eyes on the grill were also brushed with layers of sauce and gradually turned brown. The scary color and appearance faded away, and they slowly turned into meatballs. Sean, Vanessa, and Abraham were chatting casually. Because they were hiding their identities, they only talked about trivial things. However, his eyes couldn't help but take a look at the roasted pig's eyes from time to time. It had to be said that the pig's eyes on the grill that were sizzling with oil had already started to glow with a tempting oily glow. If he hadn't seen the pig's eyes slowly being roasted from blood red to the way they were now, he probably wouldn't have been so against them. "All right, serve these pig's eyes to the customers." Meg sprinkled cumin and pepper powder on the pig's eyes. He took out 2 plates, placed the roasted pig's eyes in his hands on them, and said to Yarbemia, "These 2 skewers are for Amy. Remember to remind her to leave them for a while before eating. Be careful, it's hot." "All right." Harrison ordered 10 skewers of roasted pig's eyes, Yarbemia said as she took the plates. "All right." Meg nodded. He deftly skewered the 10 skewers of pig's eyes, placed them on the grill, and continued cooking. "Your roasted pig's eyes." Mia placed the plate with the roasted pig's eyes in front of Sean. Then, she placed the other plate in front of Amy, who was already sitting obediently on the high stool behind the counter. "Thank you, big sister Mia," Amy said obediently as she reached out to take the roasted pig's eyes. "Boss said to wait a while before eating." "Be careful, it's hot," Mia reminded her. "Oh." Amy retracted her hand halfway and said obediently, "Okay, I'll wait a while before eating." The counter was taller than a normal table, and the angle was just right for everyone in the hall to see from all directions. Everyone looked at the 2 skewers of roasted pig's eyes on the plate in front of Amy. They could roughly make out the brownish-yellow pig's eyes, but they were not as scary as they looked. They looked a little like roasted meatballs. However, when they thought about how these round balls were actually pig's eyes, many people still found it hard to accept. For example, Sean, who had been watching the whole process of how the pig's eyes turned into a skewer of roasted pig's eyes before being presented to him. "Hurry up and eat, big brother. It's Uncle's treat today," Vanessa urged expectantly. Abraham? Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1625. Sean glanced at Abraham. "Of course. You can have as many roasted pig's eyes as you want. Uncle will treat you," Abraham said with a smile. He glanced at the roasted pig's eyes on the plate. The aroma of the roasted meat was already wafting into his nose. The alluring aroma made him restless. Laura, who was at the side, had already closed her eyes in fear. She didn't dare to look at the pig's eyes. Sean retracted his gaze helplessly and looked at the roasted pig's eyes in front of him. The roasted pig's eyes emitted an alluring aroma, but it had a terrifying interior. The disguise was an attempt to make people let down their guard. If they believed in it, they would probably fall into a terrifying abyss. The eyeball wasn't a ball of meat. It was filled with liquid. Even if it was roasted, it wouldn't be able to dry the liquid. The aroma wouldn't be as alluring as the aroma. "Hurry up and eat. Hurry up and eat," Vanessa encouraged from the side. "It's just a skewer of roasted pig's eyes. The battlefield is much bloodier than this." Sean picked up the roasted pig's eyes with a fearless expression. After a while, the surface didn't seem so hot anymore. He resisted the churning in his stomach, opened his mouth, and bit the first eyeball. He pulled it off the bamboo skewer. The spices mixed with the aroma of the roasted meat began to wreak havoc in his mouth. When the pig's eyes entered his mouth, his teeth came into contact with the slightly tough skin. It was soft, bouncy, and had a strange texture. It was a little strange. However, When he remembered that it was the skin of a pig's eyeball, he suddenly felt a little strange. Isn't it just a skewer of roasted pig's eyes? I'll finish it in a few bites. Sean made up his mind and bit down hard. Pfff, a soft sound rang in Sean's mind. It was the sound of the eyeball exploding. It was as if a boiling volcano had erupted in his mouth. The bag of hot gel wrapped around the eyeball instantly exploded in his mouth. Unlike the skin that had cooled down, the gel seemed to have absorbed an endless amount of heat and then exploded in his mouth. The instant heat made Sean instinctively want to spit it out. However, he quickly realized that the person sitting in front of him was Vanessa. If he opened his mouth now, the lava from the explosion would splash onto Vanessa's face. As the prince and princess of the Roth Empire, they naturally could not allow such an unsightly scene to happen. Therefore, he could only shut his mouth tightly and close his eyes at the same time. He clenched his fists tightly and enjoyed the sour feeling of a volcano erupting in his mouth alone. Is it really that delicious? Vanessa muttered curiously as she looked at Sean, who had already closed his eyes and was immersed in his work. It looks pretty good. After all, it's Mr. Mac's product. I'd believe it even if he turned the pigtail into a delicacy. Abraham nodded in agreement and prepared to order one for himself. Sean raised his eyebrows as he listened to their conversation. He felt as if all the taste buds in his mouth had been killed. This pig's eye was the devil. He even suspected that the boss was an assassin who had deliberately planted such a trap in the pig's eye in an attempt to assassinate him. Who would have thought that such a scorching and terrifying liquid would be hidden in the pig's eye? Sean closed his eyes and endured this terrifying temperature alone. He felt like killing someone. However, after the initial scorching heat, the gel's temperature gradually dropped, and Wei Lei, who had been deeply injured, began to regain his senses. The delicious taste of the exploding liquid slowly filled his mouth. It was a delightful and pleasant taste. It was as if a mouthful of delicious soup that had been simmering for a long time had been released. It flowed down his throat and into his stomach slowly, and he felt as if his entire body had become joyful. Why does it taste like this? Sean was shocked. The delicious taste soothed his scalded taste buds, and the pain seemed to have been dispelled. The sudden contrast made him a little confused for a moment. However, he had to admit that this eyeball after the explosion did bring him a wonderful taste, and even a pleasant surprise. After the liquid exploded, the eyeball was like a deflated fish bubble. He tried to chew it. The texture was a little tough, but it was soft and juicy. There was also a crispy texture that was like cartilage. The more he chewed, the more fragrant it became. It didn't have the fishy taste of pork at all, and it left a rich aftertaste. So this is the pig's eye. The texture and taste are so different in different places. It's really amazing. Sean was still savoring the roasted pig's eye with his eyes closed, but his expression had changed. It was blissful, curious, and curious. Sean opened his eyes and looked at the remaining 4 roasted pig's eyes in his hand. He couldn't help but praise, "What a wonderful delicacy. It's really delicious. That's a very high evaluation. Brother, is this roasted pig's eye really that delicious?" Vanessa looked at Sean in surprise. She had wanted to prank him with Mr. Mac's new dish, but now it seemed that her plan hadn't worked. Instead, he was the first one to taste the delicious new dish. If you can give such an evaluation, this roasted pig's eye is really worth a try. Abraham was deep in thought as he prepared to order. The customers at the surrounding tables were also looking at them. This roasted pig's eye seemed to be really good for the first time. Many people who were frightened by the pig's eye hesitated to try it themselves. Apart from the fact that you can't bite it open in a hurry, this roasted pig's eye is really amazing. Of course, the process of biting open the eyeball is also very addictive. Sean nodded. He looked at the remaining 4 pig's eyes in his hand and hesitated for a while. In the end, he didn't rush to bite the second one. About 3 minutes later, Amy, who was sitting behind the counter, couldn't resist the temptation of the roasted pig's eye. She opened her small mouth and bit into a pig's eye. The thick eyeball ran around in her mouth mischievously, but it was quickly forced to the edge of her teeth. Her sharp little teeth cut open the thin wall of the eyeball, and the warm liquid exploded in her mouth. Oh, Amy's eyes lit up. The delicious taste bloomed in her mouth, and her expression couldn't help but become blissful. The broth slowly slid into her mouth, and then she started to chew on the remaining eyeball. The roasted skin was fragrant, but the inside was fresh and juicy, and the interlayer was crispy. She chewed on it with light crunching sounds, and it was very interesting. As Amy chewed on the eyeball, she shook it slightly from side to side. She looked intoxicated and focused, and it was obvious that she was completely immersed in the deliciousness of the roasted pig's eye. After a while, she swallowed the pig's eye in her mouth and immediately bit into the second one. The customers nearby could clearly hear the soft sound of the eyeball being bitten open. The sound that made one's scalp tingle was like a trigger, and it made Amy fall into a happy and blissful state of chewing again. I think Little Boss is tempting me to commit a crime. I can't take it anymore. I don't feel guilty at all when I see Little Boss eating the roasted pig's eye. It's against the rules to be good-looking. Chapter 1626. Amy's taste testing had successfully stirred up a group of customers who usually had strong tastes to try something new. Instantly, many customers began to add more dishes, ordering 1 or 2 skewers of roasted pig's eyes. Oh my goodness, Little Boss is really a godlike salesman. Even the roasted pig's eyes are so delicious. I can't stand it. George looked at Amy with glowing eyes. Isn't your Chris quite obedient too? Harrison pursed his lips, feeling a little jealous. Hehe, that little fellow still doesn't know how to eat other things. But she's still super cute. Just looking at her makes my mood soar. George chuckled, not hiding his smugness. You can just be a show-off. Anyway, those 3 kids of yours are completely out of favor now. Boys should be more independent. Of course, daughters should be doted on, George said nonchalantly. Here are your 10 skewers of roasted pig's eyes and rum. Barbara waved her hand, and a plate of roasted pig's eyes and a glass of rum appeared in front of Harrison. Her voice reached Harrison's ears almost at the same time. Thank you, Harrison said as he looked at the kitchen. Harrison said as he looked in the direction of the kitchen. He was already very familiar with this method of serving food without seeing anyone. How impressive was it to have a spatial magic caster serve food for him? Although I can still vaguely make out the shape of the eyeballs, this aroma is really amazing. It's still a little different from roasted meat, but it's just as tempting. George looked at Harrison's roasted pig's eyes, and his hand had already reached out as he said, "Let me try 1 skewer for you first. I'll return it to you when mine is served later. Don't even think about it. This is the dinner of a lonely traveler without a wife or daughter. I won't allow anyone else to share it." Harrison grabbed the plate first and pulled it in front of him. He picked up a skewer of roasted pig's eyes with a smug expression, and sniffed it carefully with an intoxicated look on his face. "This smell can really heal all injuries," Harrison complimented before biting off a pig's eye. The pig's eye was like a bulging fish bubble in his mouth. It was so tough that he couldn't bite it open immediately. Sigh, it's still a little cheeky. Harrison raised his eyebrows. He used his tongue and mouth to finally fix the eyeball in place, and then bit it open. Oh, the moment he bit down, the boiling liquid burst out of his eyeball. The heat made Harrison's fat jiggle, and he opened his mouth almost out of reflex. The liquid that burst out of his eyeball splattered all over George's face. Fuck. You fucking shot my fucking face. George also jumped up on the spot, not knowing whether to laugh or cry as he wiped his face. I. Harrison was so scalded that he couldn't speak. He felt as if a volcano had erupted in his mouth. Instantly, he felt unwell. However, when he opened his mouth, the temperature in his mouth quickly dropped, and his taste buds gradually regained their senses. They began to notice the fresh taste, and the heat and pain were gradually replaced by pleasure. Harrison's eyes gradually lit up, and he closed his mouth. This taste. Harrison frowned and pondered. This taste was so different. It didn't taste like bone broth, nor like meat broth. It was slightly sticky and gelatinous, and scattered in the mouth. It was like a little bitch starting to tease the taste buds that were deeply hurt by it just now. What was hard to accept was that the taste buds fell for her trick so easily, and even got tricked into bed by her. Harrison sucked on that delicious juice greedily, and started to try chewing the remaining parts of the exploded eyeball. Crunch, crunch. The eyeball made a sound like bones being chewed. The chewy texture brought about a very interesting and wonderful chewing experience, and the occasional surprise from the eyeball made the chewing even more interesting. Gyurge thought that Harrison had stepped on a landmine at first, but he didn't expect him to fall into a state of excitement after letting out a bark. Judging from his perverted expression, he seemed to be very satisfied and addicted to it. This roasted pig's eyes is like a combination of a devil and an angel. First, it erupts in your mouth like a volcano, and then it extinguishes the fire very quickly. Then, it blossoms with extreme deliciousness, making you willingly kneel before it, Harrison said with admiration. Is it really that good? Gyurge was doubtful. Try it if you don't believe me. Harrison took a skewer of roasted pig's eyes and handed it over. However, before he let go, he said seriously, "But you can't eat it in front of me. This is really scary, but I want to try it at the same time." Gyurge took the roasted pig's eyes. He hesitated for a while, but still opened his mouth and took a bite. The resilient eyeball rubbed against his teeth. Gyurge was a little scared when he thought about how Harrison let out a pig's bark when he was scalded. However, after hearing Harrison's comments and watching Little Boss's livestream, he couldn't help but feel tempted again. He wouldn't give up until he tried it himself. The more scared he was, the more he thought about it. His eyebrows were knitted together. Finally, the eyeball still exploded in his anxiety and anticipation. The scorching liquid exploded in his mouth. However, after learning from Harrison's experience, Gyurge didn't rush to open his mouth this time. Instead, he waited for the crazy eruption to end before opening his mouth wide and taking a few deep breaths to let the heat in his mouth dissipate as much as possible. Tears were already glistening in his eyes. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to preserve the delicious liquid as much as possible, he would have spat out the boiling pig's eyes immediately. However, just as Harrison said, after the heat subsided, the deliciousness began to appear and wreaked havoc in his mouth without restraint. Gyurge also fell into a delicious cycle where the more he chewed, the more fragrant and delicious it became. This roasted pig's eyes are really amazing. It's delicious and painful, but it's irresistible. Yeah, Mr. Mac is too ruthless. Isn't this torture? Harrison and Gyurge said with tears in their eyes as they ate the roasted pig's eyes. The behavior of these two brothers also attracted the attention of the surrounding customers. They couldn't help but wonder if they should jump into this trap. I say, fat uncles, why can't you wait for the pig's eyes to cool down before eating? Amy asked the two of them with a strange expression as she bit the pig's eyes. Her little face was filled with a blissful smile, and she wasn't bothered by the scorching liquid at all. Harrison and Gyurge looked at each other in shock. They were actually speechless. At the side, the customers who had just taken a bite of the roasted pig's eyes either grimaced in pain from the scalding liquid or blasted the faces of the customers sitting opposite them. The customers were all blushing. This is called a hasty man never eats the roasted pig's eyes. Amy walked slowly to the kitchen door. She looked at Meg and said, "Father, can I have 2 more skewers? I'm super good at eating." Author's house. Chapter 16:27. Sean's half-eaten roasted pig's eyes ended up in Abraham's mouth. "My roasted pig's eyes are here. Do you want to try them?" Abraham had 5 skewers of roasted pig's eyes in front of him. He looked at Vanessa with a smile and said, "When we return to Rodu, we won't be able to eat such wild delicacies anymore. I don't want them." Vanessa shook her head, but her throat moved subconsciously. Although she felt goosebumps at the thought of those skewers of pig's eyes, her body was very honestly tempted by the aroma. "Big brother, can I not go back? Please, I don't want to go home. I want to continue staying with Uncle." Vanessa shifted her gaze away from the roasted pig's eyes and looked at Sean pitifully. Look at him. He's so lonely. If he eats too much and falls sick one day, how pitiful would it be for him to be alone in a foreign land? No, no, no. I'm not lonely at all. Food is my best playmate. Chaos City is my heaven, and Mammoth is my second home. I'm not pitiful at all. Abraham shook his head as he took a bite of the pig's eye, and closed his eyes blissfully. I've eaten the roasted pig's eyes. This time, it's your turn to fulfill your promise, Sean said sincerely as he looked into Vanessa's eyes. All right, I'm just kidding. Vanessa shrugged and sighed. Here, I can't bring this back to Rodu for you. Abraham picked up a skewer of roasted pig's eyes and passed it to her. Is it really delicious? Vanessa was still a little doubtful. Of course. Once you try it, I believe you won't be able to reject it. Abraham nodded with certainty, and took another pig's eye into his mouth. He used his slightly exaggerated expression to express his absolute respect for this eyeball. Young mistress, if you don't like it, you'd better not eat it. Laura persuaded softly. She knew the princess's tolerance limit very well. Such terrifying food was already beyond what she could accept. Indeed, there's no need for that. Sean nodded as well. Although the roasted pig's eyes gave him quite a pleasant surprise, he didn't have the desire to eat another skewer of pig's eyes. No, if I don't try it myself, it will be one of my biggest regrets. Vanessa's gaze suddenly became determined. She took a deep breath and took the skewer of roasted pig's eyes from Abraham's hands. She closed her eyes and bit into one of the skewers. After the experience of Sean and Abraham being scalded, Vanessa was extra careful this time. The flexible pig's eye was like a mischievous elf as it darted left and right in his mouth. His teeth gently rubbed against the surface of the eye, as if he was afraid that he would accidentally break it. However, he was also filled with anticipation towards the thing inside the eyeball. This process was undoubtedly very torturous. The faint anticipation and fear had even surpassed the pig's eye itself. Finally, the pig's eye that had been mischievous in her mouth for a long time was caught off guard by her bite. At the moment when the liquid exploded, the warm liquid finally blossomed. This was the true meaning of life. Vanessa felt as if a rainbow had appeared in front of her tightly shut eyes. It was a beautiful taste that made her feel radiant. After the liquid exploded, the wonderful texture of chewing on the eyeball quickly made her forget about the fact that it was a terrifying pig's eye. She even had a strange thought, so what if it's an eyeball? As long as it's delicious. This roasted pig's eye is too good. It's crazy and addictive. Vanessa opened her eyes in surprise. She looked at the roasted pig's eye in her hand as if she had found a treasure. Right. It's super good. Abraham chuckled. He knew Vanessa's taste very well. How could she resist such a delicacy? But miss, this is a pig's eye. Laura looked at Vanessa in confusion. Since when did the princess, who was even afraid of pigs, dare to chew on a pig's eye and even praise it as delicious? No, this is not a pig's eye. Vanessa shook her head. With a serious expression, she said, this is a roasted pig's eye made by Mr. Mac. Ever since it was put on the grill, it was no longer an ordinary pig's eye. It was a pig's eye that was blessed by the god of cookery. The beautiful rainbow is its protective color. It's irresistible. Huh. Laura was still a little confused. Anyway, it's delicious. Vanessa took another bite of the roasted pig's eye, and added, give me 5 more skewers. No, 10 skewers of roasted pig's eye. 10 skewers. Yes, 10 skewers. Vanessa nodded with certainty. When we return to Rodu, we won't be able to eat such delicious food anymore. This. Sean looked at Vanessa, who was happily chewing on the roasted pig's eye, and didn't know what to say for a moment. He could only silently pick up a piece of fish and put it into his mouth. Fuck. It's insanely spicy again. Sean's face turned red instantly, but he couldn't do anything too exaggerated. He could only grit his teeth and hold it in. Vanessa and Abraham had a hearty dinner, while Sean walked out of Amy's, speechless. Go back and get ready. I'll come and fetch you tomorrow morning. Sean helped Vanessa into the carriage. Before he lowered the curtain, he looked at her and said gently, Father and Mother really miss you. Millimeter. Actually, I miss them too. Don't worry, I'll go home with Big Brother Sean tomorrow. Vanessa nodded obediently. Okay. Sean nodded. He lowered the curtain and watched the carriage disappear into the distance. Then, he got into another black carriage, and coldly instructed, let's go back. Invite me to the Magic Caster Conference. Hehe, I'm not interested. Crassus played with the fireball in his hand, and waved his hand disinterestedly. Master. Crassus, you've always been the one to open the Magic Caster Conference in the past. You're the one who initiated the Magic Caster Conference, and also an important promoter of the development of magic. If you don't attend the Magic Caster Conference, many young magic casters who embarked on the path of magic because of your influence will be very disappointed, Brent said awkwardly. An awkward expression appeared on Brent's face as he stood at the door. They were going back to Rhodu the next day, so they had no choice but to come to Crassus today. If they couldn't get his approval, they would all be punished when they returned. Yes, Master Crassus. This time, we're not only inviting you, we're also inviting your precious disciple to attend the Magic Caster Conference. She'll be the youngest registered magic caster. Elliot nodded at the side. You want Amy to attend the Magic Caster Conference and compete for the qualifiers? Crassus turned to look at Elliot, and his eyes narrowed slightly. That's right. Your disciple is still young. We can let her join the infant group, Elliot quickly corrected himself. Crassus shook his head, and said, no need. The infant group is just a friendly competition. It's not challenging at all. Let her participate in the official qualifiers for the younger generation of magic casters. But wouldn't that be too unfair to her? Elliot asked worriedly. I'm the one who set this stupid rule, and this disciple is also mine. Do you understand or do I understand? Boss, you have the final say. Elliot immediately gave in. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1628. After leaving the Grey Temple, Irina looked at Meg's back view, and asked, what do you think about that mural of the giant dragons? It proves that our previous inference is correct. The Great Old Ones really exist, and they do have the ability to bewitch people and make the whole world go crazy. Meg stopped in his tracks, and looked at Irina. Moreover, they once worked together to seal the Great Old Ones back then. This means that those fellows are not invincible. Before they completely remove the seal and escape, as long as the whole Norland continent cooperates, we might be able to find a way to seal them again. Irina was silent for a while, and said, since the giant dragons already know about the existence of the Great Old Ones, they will definitely stand on our side during the peace talks. I don't think so. It's still unknown whether the giant dragon race will stand on our side because of a mural. As an extremely conceited race, they will always think that the giant dragon race is the strongest existence. It won't be easy for them to believe and admit that there are existences that are stronger than them in this world, and that can even kill them like mosquitoes. Meg shook his head. He wasn't too optimistic, but he still smiled, and said, however, this will be a big piece of evidence for us. Together with the evidence and information we have now, we might be able to convince more people that the Great Old Ones really exist in this world. What about Sean? Are we just going to let him go without doing anything? Irina asked. What do you want to do? Meg asked with a smile. Forget it. Since we can't kill him, there's no point. Irina thought for a while, and shook her head. I'm afraid I won't be able to resist killing him if I see him. The renovation of the brightly lit hot pot restaurant had been completed. Raina, who had just gotten off work from Amy's, was now standing in front of a group of elves and lecturing them. I'll be in control of the hot pot space during the early stages. However, in terms of the ingredients, serving, and service, you still need to strictly follow the restaurant's procedures. Our hot pot restaurant will be open for business in 3 days. There's not much time left for us to practice, but we must do our best before the opening. Raina looked at the 50 or so elves before her with a serious expression, and said, everyone has been working very hard these past few days, and we're already able to maintain the intensity of a meal for 1,000 people. However, this is still not enough, because if an accident were to occur at this level, everything would be thrown into chaos. All of the elves listened intently without showing any signs of impatience. All of you are the most outstanding elves chosen by the Night Elves. I know that your abilities and limits are far from enough. Moreover, you will start to rotate in batches in 3 months. I think that before you leave, you will all become top-notch chefs. Raina smiled, and said to the elves, I hope we can make Mana Hot Pot Restaurant the second best hot pot restaurant in Chaos City in the next 3 months. All of the elves also smiled. Raina continued, all right, we will practice for another 3 hours today. Expand the coverage area for everyone, simplify the steps of serving, and clarify the serving route and sequence. Princess, can't you sleep? Laura, who was lying in the outer room, heard the sound of tossing and turning in bed. She got out of bed, lit an oil lamp, put on her clothes, and walked to the bed to ask softly. Vanessa turned around, and her eyes sparkled under the light. She sat up from the bed immediately, and said to Laura, Laura, let's run away again. Huh? Laura was stunned. She quickly shook her head, and said, no, Princess. We can't run away again. If His Highness catches us, I'll definitely be beaten to death. Don't be afraid. I'm here. I'll protect you. Vanessa pulled Laura to the bed, and softly said, I don't want to go home at all. I haven't had enough fun yet. Those fellows in Rodu are not interesting at all. It's more fun outside. Laura looked at Vanessa, and her heart softened. She knew better than anyone what the princess had been through all these years. Those nobles and young mistresses were all sucking up to the princess on the surface, but none of them really treated her as a friend in private. They even said some nasty things to her. Hence, the princess didn't like gatherings, didn't like Rodu, and didn't like those young mistresses from noble families. The past few months in Chaos City were probably the happiest days for the princess. She had never smiled so happily every day like she did during this period of time. She made some humble but honest friends, and even had her teeth healed. Laura looked at Vanessa, and asked, but Your Highness, your teeth are already healed. You're the most beautiful woman in Rodu now. Don't you want those fellows who used to talk bad about you and laugh at you behind your back to take a good look at you now, and then let them cry at home? Huh? Vanessa faltered. After pondering for a while, she looked at Laura, and confirmed, am I really the most beautiful woman in Rodu now? Millimeter. There's no woman more beautiful than you. Laura nodded seriously with a smile on her face. She didn't know where the princess had picked up this dialect from. In that case, there really is one more reason to go back. Vanessa rested her chin on her hand, and the corners of her lips began to curl upward. She was already looking forward to the next royal banquet, where she would wear a gorgeous dress and look down on those little bitches with their jaws dropped. All right. Since father and mother both miss me, I'll go back. Vanessa nodded. Laura heaved a sigh of relief. She still didn't know what kind of punishment she would receive when she returned to the palace. After all, she had left the palace with the princess without reporting it, and that was already a crime worthy of death 100 times. Let's go back and stay for a while. After that, we'll run out again and come back to Chaos City, Vanessa continued. You're still running away? Of course. Mammis is the source of my happiness every day. Of course, we're still going to come back. Vanessa nodded with certainty. In a conference hall, Sean, 2 generals, and 2 great magic casters were gathered together. Your Highness, Alex and Irina haven't appeared in the past 2 days. Could they be plotting something? One of the generals asked Sean with a worried expression. Yes. Those 2 are so arrogant. They didn't even try to restrain themselves in Rodu, but they're so quiet in Chaos City. I'm afraid there's something fishy going on. Brent nodded as he rubbed his fat belly. Everyone chimed in one after another, and the atmosphere in the conference hall became a little tense. Even though they had 2 10th tier knights and 2 10th tier magic casters, they were up against 2 super demon kings, Alex and Irina. Even though they had a numerical advantage, they didn't have the slightest bit of confidence in being able to defeat them. They have indeed changed. If they were still Alex and Irina, I would have met them before I even reached Chaos City, Sean said with a grave expression. This situation made him even more worried. Chapter 1630. Isn't it just drawing a picture? Although the client's requirements are a bit high, at least they didn't ask for a square circle. Meg raised his eyebrows and looked at Hannah in his arms. He still carried her upstairs and put her on her bed in the study, covering her with a blanket. There was floor heating in the room, so the temperature was just right. It was a good place to sleep. Let's hope this machine is reliable. Meg went downstairs, took the stack of drawings, and went to the blacksmith shop next door. Meg asked Morbai to make the brewing machine. Morbai knew many excellent dwarven blacksmiths. After confirming that there were no problems with the drawings, he agreed to Meg's business. In addition to the agreed amount of money, he also asked for 3 servings of Yeongju fried rice a day, the kind that would be delivered directly to the door. Once the project started, it would be very busy. There would be no time to wait in line for 1 or 2 hours in front of Mammoth. So Meg agreed to this request without hesitation. He would let Hannah be in charge of delivering the food. She had nothing to do recently anyway. Mr. Mac, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Let me show you something. Morbai stopped Meg, who was about to leave, and led him to the empty room next door. In the empty room, there were some metal pieces and tools scattered on the floor. In the middle of the room, there was an object that was about the height of a person and covered by a black cloth. What is this? Meg was a bit confused. Morbai went forward and pulled off the black cloth forcefully. An awe-inspiring cannon appeared in Mag's vision. This is my latest improved automatic firing cannon. After changing the ignition method, the firing efficiency has been greatly improved. Moreover, the firing range and hit rate have also increased by a lot. Now, it can accurately hit a fixed target 500 meters away. The radius of destruction is 100 meters, and the furthest it can go is 800 meters, Morbai said excitedly. Meg's eyes lit up. He walked around the cannon and nodded in praise. That's a huge improvement. It's all thanks to Mr. Mac's advice. Morbai scratched his head in embarrassment. If it wasn't for Mr. Mac's advice, he wouldn't have known how to improve it. All I did was share some of my thoughts. It's all thanks to you that you were able to complete it to this extent. Meg said with a smile. He was indeed surprised by Morbai's hands-on ability and talent in making cannons. It's just that this kind of power isn't even comparable to a level 3 magician's fireball spell. Morbai sighed softly, but a confident smile soon appeared on his face. But I've recently discussed with a few fire mags. If we add some active fire element materials into the explosives, it might be able to increase the power of the explosives. It's just that we haven't decided on how to implement it yet. That's a good direction. Meg nodded in agreement. He didn't know much about explosives in his previous life, and didn't know how to make powerful explosives. After all, this was a world with magic. Adding agitated magic element materials was indeed a good way to increase the power of the explosives. Meg was about to return to the restaurant after coming out from Morbai's blacksmith shop. However, he saw that the sun was just right, so he changed his direction and walked towards the park. Aiden Square had the biggest park in Chaos City. It hadn't snowed for a while, so the snow had almost melted. There were only some ice shards left in the dark corners where the sun couldn't reach. The children were playing in the park, while the adults found empty seats to sit and chat with each other. The bright sunshine dispelled the chill of winter, making one's mood seem relaxed and cheerful. You said you have kidney deficiency? Don't look for those charlatans. Let me tell you a good place. Go to Mammoth and order Buddha jumps over the wall. It's a nourishing and holy dish that cures kidney deficiency. It doesn't contain any sugar. 1 serving is more effective than taking medicine for half a year. I guarantee that your wife will be obedient to you. You said your memory isn't very good recently? Then go to Mammoth too. Eat more steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. I guarantee that your brain will be sharper than your grandson's. You won't have a headache tutoring homework in the future. You said your skin is dry and you have pimples, your face is yellow and wrinkled, and your husband is not at home? Hurry up and arrange for Mammoth tofu pudding. Eat a bowl every day, and in less than a month, your husband will be a groom every day. What kind of place is Mammoth? A pharmacy? You don't know? This is the best restaurant in Chaos City. However, if you want to say that it's a pharmacy, it's not completely wrong. After all, there are so many difficult and complicated diseases that even doctors and magic casters can't do anything about, but they can be cured after having a meal at Mammoth. There's no injection or medicine, and delicious food is a form of enjoyment. Where else can we find such a good thing? Mag walked past a group of chatting uncles and aunties in the park with a blush on his face. He didn't think that there would be such a rumor going around. Wasn't he the best chef in the world? Why did he feel like he was a quack doctor? However, hearing that so many people had obtained a pleasant surprise while reaping delicious food at Mammoth gave him a sense of achievement. Meg didn't want to be a doctor as that would be disrespectful to his profession, but he didn't mind continuing to do what he was doing. He wanted more customers to benefit, and perhaps even change their lives, so that was also a great encouragement to him. After strolling around the park, Meg went to the ice cream shop. Even though the weather was very cold, that didn't stop the enthusiasm of the children and young people. The ice cream shop was still doing very well, and MIA and the others were all very busy. After finishing their work here, they still had to go to the restaurant to continue preparing for lunch. Isn't ice cream just ice cubes? Why do so many people like to eat it? And why do they like it in such cold weather? Angela stood beside the ice cream machine and looked on with a perplexed expression as MIA handed one ice cream after another to the customers. In such cold weather, it wouldn't be difficult for even a normal person to obtain ice cubes. As for the different colors of the different ice creams, that was most likely due to the addition of some kind of color-matching substance. Angela, do you want to try an ice cream? You haven't tried one yet, right? MIA handed the last ice cream to a young girl and turned to look at Angela with a smile. Angela actually wasn't very interested in ice cream. In such cold weather, even if she stayed indoors, she still didn't want to eat something cold. This ice cream is super delicious, I'll treat you. Which flavor do you want? Yarbemia asked with a smile. Angela looked at Yarbemia and hesitated for a moment before saying, I'll have a strawberry one. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1631. 5 minutes later. Angela stuck out her pink tongue and licked the ice cream at the corner of her mouth. She was a little embarrassed, but she looked at MIA expectantly and asked, Big sister MIA, how much is this ice cream? Can I buy one? She realized that she was completely wrong. The ice cream was not an ice cube at all, but an exceptionally delicious dessert. It melted in the mouth and did not have the hardness and bone-chilling coldness of ice cubes. The rich strawberry fragrance and sweetness made one indulge in it. It was a delicacy that made one unable to extricate themselves from. MIA smiled and said, the ice cream is 200 copper coins each. According to boss's rules, employees can enjoy a 10% discount, which is 20 copper coins each. A 10% discount. Angela's eyes lit up. She didn't expect there to be such benefits as an employee of Mammoth. She pondered seriously for a while, and said, then can I have a strawberry ice cream and a blueberry ice cream? MIA quickly passed a blueberry ice cream to Angela, and reminded her, of course. But boss said that you can only have 3 ice creams at a time, so after these 2 ice creams, you can't have any more ice creams today. Millimeter. Angela nodded, but she was soon immersed in the delicious blueberry ice cream. This fruit that she had never heard of also brought a very wonderful eating experience. Speaking of which, Mr. Mac is indeed more talented than the crayfish restaurant's boss. Even a dessert can be so delicious, and he knows how to cook all kinds of delicious food, not just crayfish, Angela thought to herself as she licked the ice cream. However, since he is boss's disciple, why doesn't boss care about him at all? Angela thought to herself, feeling strange. After all, the crayfish restaurant had disappeared mysteriously, and only a pile of gravel was left behind. The crayfish restaurant's boss and his family of 3 had disappeared mysteriously. Of course, she was most curious about Jane, who was helping at the side. This demon maiden with golden horns on her head was her colleague at the crayfish restaurant on Carapace Island. Why would she appear in Chaos City, which was thousands of miles away, and in this restaurant? Since yesterday, she hadn't found a chance to be alone with Jane, so she hadn't asked the question in her heart. After she left, Jane should still be in the crayfish restaurant. Perhaps she would know where the crayfish restaurant owner's family of 3 went. If she asks, how should I answer? Boss said that it's best not to mention what happened on Carapace Island and expose his identity. What should I say? Jane thought worriedly in her heart. She was the worst at lying. She didn't know what to say or how to cover up her lie. Doesn't big sister Camilla come to the ice cream shop usually? Angela looked at Mia and asked softly. That's right. Sister Camilla will only appear in the restaurant before the opening hours. She and Phyllis will be in charge of the cutting work. They have to cut and mix all the ingredients needed during the opening hours. It's a huge workload. Mia nodded and said with a smile, but she doesn't seem to want others to know that she works in the restaurant, so she leaves after every meal and never appears during business hours. So that's how it is. Angela nodded thoughtfully. As a demon, of course she knew who Camilla was. She was the princess of the vampire race, the famous Black Widow Countess Bartoli. Angela was indeed shocked when she first found out that she was in charge of the cutting work at Mammoth with her status and identity. After all, the ancestor of the vampire race changed a few months ago. The vampire Dracula became the new ancestor, and that was Camilla's biological uncle. As a ruthless character who caused the death of her husband on their wedding night, Angela felt a trace of a similar aura from her. All these years, she hadn't remarried. While it was touching, it also made Angela a little suspicious. After all, she didn't look like a vampire who would stay a widow for the rest of her life at all. However, with her status and ability, why would she be willing to be a clerk in this restaurant? Was it just to experience life? Or was it related to the boss? It's really an interesting restaurant. Angela licked the ice cream, and the corners of her lips curled up. Perhaps she would be able to find out something interesting here. Let's go. I really can't treat this eye disease, an old doctor said resolutely as he sent Lucy and her brother out. Doctor, I beg you. Please take a look at my brother. He's only 10 years old. Lucy grabbed the doctor's sleeve and took out a cloth bag with reddened eyes as she said, We have money. We have medical fees. Please take a look at his eyes. This was already the 5th doctor they had rejected, and it was said that he was the best doctor in Chaos City who could treat eyes. The simple sled, the blind young man, and the skinny young lady quickly attracted the attention of the passers-by. Many people stopped and looked at them with pity. Young lady, this isn't a matter of money. If it can be treated, I will definitely help. The old doctor shook his head and sighed as he looked at Darren. It's just that this eye disease is really strange. I've been a doctor for decades, and have treated more than 10,000 patients with eye diseases, but I've never seen such a strange disease. Using medicine rashly might worsen the condition, so I don't dare to take over. Perhaps other knowledgeable doctors will have a way. Isn't that Dr. Adolphus? Yes. The best ophthalmologist in Chaos City. He has brought light and new life to many patients. Then, why doesn't he want to treat this young man's eyes? Who knows? Maybe it's a very tricky situation. If even Dr. Adolphus can't do anything, I think it's impossible. So pitiful. He can't see at such a young age. What is he going to do in the future? The onlookers discussed softly with some sighs. Lucy's tears could no longer be stopped as she watched the doctor and the onlookers helplessly. She had dragged Darren all the way to Chaos City, and found the best doctor with the money that the villagers had pooled together, but they still couldn't make Darren see again. Was there really no way to treat his eyes? It's all right, big sister. Let's go home. I'm fine. Darren reached out and felt around in the air as a pale smile appeared on his tender face. Lucy wiped her tears away and grabbed Darren's hand as she resolutely said, No, Darren. I will definitely cure your eyes. I will let you see this world again. The onlookers' voices became softer as they looked at the pair of siblings with pity. They should have walked a long way. The little girl's straw shoes were already worn out, and her little feet were red from the cold. There were also 2 deep scratches on her shoulders from the old and tattered animal skin coat. She was so young, but she had to shoulder so many things. It was heart-wrenching. Little girl, let me bring you to a place. Perhaps it can cure your little brother's eye disease. An old man walked out from the crowd. He put the account book under his armpit and reached his hand out to Lucy. I am Christopher, the accountant of Albert's jewelry shop. No pop-up window. Chapter 1632. Do you really know a place that can cure Darren's eyes? Lucy looked at this kind-looking old man hesitantly. Ever since she came to Chaos City, she had already been recommended 4 or 5 times, but none of the doctors could cure Darren's eyes. Yes. You might not believe it, but just yesterday, my eyes were no longer able to read what was written in the account book normally. But today, I can see the birds singing in the trees in the distance. It's all so unbelievable, Christopher said with a smile. He even had a look of disbelief on his face. Little girl, you don't have to worry that this old gentleman is lying to you. Albert's jewelry shop is the biggest jewelry shop in Chaos City, and Mr. Christopher is a very friendly and helpful gentleman. He might really be able to help you, a well-dressed lady at the side said to Lucy with a smile. Long time no see, Madam Catherine. Christopher looked at the lady and nodded slightly in greeting. She was a regular customer of the gold shop, and he often saw her when he was on duty. Lucy's eyes lit up again when she heard that. She looked at Christopher and said, if it's possible, please bring us to that place. Although she had failed many times, she still felt warmth in Chaos City. Everyone was trying to help them passionately. However, Darren's eyes seemed to be very troublesome. So far, no doctor had said that they could cure him. Christopher looked at the simple sleigh parked at the side, and a hint of heartache flashed across his eyes. He said in a gentle voice, that place is a little far from here. Leave your sleigh here for now, and take my carriage there. Millimeter. Lucy nodded. She pulled Darren and followed behind Christopher. She kept looking back at her sleigh worriedly. Little girl, don't worry. I will look after the sleigh for you, Dr. Adolphus said with a smile. Thank you, Lucy quickly said gratefully. She was finally relieved. Get on. Christopher helped Darren into the horse-drawn carriage, and only got on after Lucy got on. The 4-wheeled carriage was rather spacious. There were seats on 3 sides, and soft animal skin was laid out. However, Lucy and Darren were still standing a little awkwardly. Christopher sat down at the side, and said to the two of them with a smile, have a seat. Why are you standing? I can't take all the seats by myself. Our bodies are too dirty. We can't dirty your seat. We only need to stand. Lucy shook her head and said as she looked at her dirty animal skin clothes that she had fallen a few times on the road. You child. Christopher sighed in his heart. The little girl was about the same age as his granddaughter, but his granddaughter was studying in Chaos School now, and had a horse-drawn carriage to send her to and from school every day. It's okay, you can wash it if it's dirty. Hurry up and sit down. It's not safe to stand. It won't be a joke if you fall, Christopher said as gently as he could. Then, Lucy looked around, and pulled Darren to sit on the floor of the carriage. She looked at Christopher with a radiant smile, and said, we can sit here. It's also very soft and comfortable. The inside of the carriage was carpeted, which was much more resistant to dirt than the animal skin cushions. Christopher looked at the smiling young lady and the silent young man, and fell silent for a moment. He also smiled, and said, all right, let's set off then. The horse-drawn carriage continued forward, but it stopped for a while when it passed by a clothing shop. Christopher alighted, and came back with 2 sets of clothes and a pair of red leather boots. Come, children. Change your clothes first. It's so cold today, don't catch a cold. Christopher handed the clothes and shoes to Lucy, and turned to walk out. I'll wait for you under the carriage. Let me know when you're done changing. Lucy shook her head as she looked at the bright clothes and red shoes, and said, Mr. Christopher, we have clothes. We're not cold at all. Little girl, you're about the same age as my granddaughter, so just take it as a small gift from Grandpa. After you change your clothes, I'll bring you to see your eyes, Christopher said with a smile as he put down the curtain and alighted from the carriage. Big sister. Darren turned to look at Lucy, and shyly said, Mr. Christopher is really a good person. Yeah, just like Grandpa. Lucy nodded. She looked a little sad at the mention of her grandpa. If only Grandpa was still around. Darren also pursed his lips slightly. It's all right. As long as your eyes can be cured, Grandpa will be very happy in heaven. Let's change our clothes first. Then, we won't have to worry about dirtying Mr. Christopher's carriage. Lucy quickly changed the topic, and took out Darren's clothes for him to change into. It was a dark blue cotton coat, and it was a little too big for Darren. However, he immediately became much more energetic after changing into it. It's so warm. What comfortable clothes. Darren raised his hand, and a rare smile appeared on his face. Lucy also took off her dirty and tattered beastskin coat and pants, and put on the soft cotton coat and pants. It was as if she had crawled into a warm bed, and it was so comfortable that she wanted to sleep. Her clothes fit her very well, as if they were tailor-made for her. The coat was a white beastskin coat, unlike her rough leather coat. It was soft and comfortable, and felt very warm just by touching it. It should be the fur of some magical beast, and it was a terrifying existence that even the best hunter in the village wouldn't dare to provoke. Lucy only reached out to touch the coat, and then folded it neatly, and gently placed it on a chair at the side. Her gaze landed on the pair of red leather boots at the side. What a beautiful pair of shoes. The workmanship was stunning. Red top, black sole, and a layer of soft and comfortable brown fur in the shoes. Even the shoemaker in the village had never made such beautiful shoes. She lowered her head to look at her feet. Her toes, which were red from the cold, were sticking out from the holes in the straw sandals. It looked rather comical. Can I accept such a precious gift? Lucy was a little conflicted. She couldn't take her eyes off the red shoes. Are you done? Christopher's voice sounded from outside the carriage. We can't delay Darren's treatment. Lucy quickly picked up the pair of red shoes, and quickly took off her straw sandals, and put on the new pair of shoes. Oh, it's so warm. Lucy's eyes lit up immediately. She felt as if her frozen feet were placed on a warm oven. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 1633. The warm feeling on her feet made Lucy want to cry. She had never worn such comfortable shoes before. Sister. Darren tilted his head in confusion. I'm fine, Lucy quickly replied. Then, she reached out to lift the curtain, and said to Mr. Christopher, who was waiting outside the carriage, Sir, we're done changing. Why aren't you wearing a coat? Christopher asked with a frown as he got onto the carriage and looked at the leather coat that Lucy had folded neatly at the side. I'm really grateful that you brought us to see the doctor and gave us new clothes. However, this leather coat is too precious. I can't accept it. Lucy shook her head with a smile, and said, I'm already very warm wearing this. I've never been so warm before. Christopher's heart ached even more when he saw the innocent smile on Lucy's face. He glanced at the pure white leather coat, and hesitated for a while. But, he didn't insist, and nodded. All right, then take a seat. We should set off now. If we're late, we won't be able to get in the queue. Lucy pulled Darren to a chair at the side and sat down awkwardly. She looked at Christopher, and curiously asked, Is that a very famous doctor? Millimeterham, very famous. Christopher nodded. After some thought, he said, Perhaps he can also be called a doctor. That's great. Lucy's eyes lit up. That doctor must be very powerful to be able to make the old man trust him so much. Perhaps he could really treat Darren's eyes. The carriage traveled for a while before stopping. Let's go, children. We're here. Christopher got up and lifted the curtain to walk out. Darren, let's go. Lucy held Darren's hand and followed him out of the carriage. 2 long queues appeared in her vision. There were elves, demons, humans, and so on. Are they all here to see a doctor? Lucy was stunned, and found it a little unbelievable. Come, children. Let's go to the back of the queue. Christopher waved at the 2 of them, and walked to the back of the queue. Millimeterham. Lucy agreed, and helped Darren out of the carriage. She followed Christopher to the back of the group. But with such a long line, when would it be their turn? Lucy carefully observed the people in the queue. Their eyes were bright, and there were no injuries on their bodies. Apart from the expectant look on their faces, as if they were waiting for a doctor with superb medical skills, most of them did not look like they were sick. Christopher, why did you bring your granddaughter here today? Aren't you going to drink more rum? A white-haired old man chuckled as he looked at Christopher. They were old drinking buddies and knew each other well. He knew that Christopher had a granddaughter around the same age, but he had never met her. Yes. The weather is good today, so I brought them out for a meal. Christopher nodded with a smile. He didn't reveal Lucy and Darren's identities. Lucy nodded at the old man in greeting. Since he was Mr. Christopher's friend, he must be a good person. But wasn't this a doctor's pharmacy? Why did he want Mr. Christopher to drink more wine? Lucy was a little confused. The old man smiled and nodded at Lucy. His gaze landed on Darren, and he couldn't help but exclaim when he saw his white eyes, "What's wrong with this child's eyes?" The old man's words attracted the attention of the people around them. Darren hid behind Lucy fearfully. Although he couldn't see, he could still feel some gazes on him. The young man looked rather delicate and cute, but his eyes seemed to be blind. It was a pity that he couldn't see at such a young age. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Lucy grabbed Darren's hand and comforted him softly. She knew that these people meant no harm. This child suddenly lost his sight recently. "I've looked for all the doctors, but they couldn't do anything about it. That's why I brought him here to Mr. Mac to try," Christopher said directly without hiding anything. He was still unsure if the sudden clarity of his eyes was really due to the rum. If he was wrong, he might harm this child and hurt the young lady's heart. "This child can't see. Shouldn't you bring him to see a doctor? Why did you bring Mr. Mac here to try?" "I've never heard that Mr. Mac knows how to treat eyes," the old man said with a puzzled expression. "Yeah. I've heard that Mr. Mac knows how to treat hair loss and kidney deficiency, but I've never heard that he knows how to treat eyes." "That's right. Mr. Mac has already become the best hairdresser in Chaos City. But if we're talking about treating eyes, Dr. Adolphus should be more professional, right?" The people around them also chimed in. "We came here from Dr. Adolphus's place just now. He couldn't do anything about it, either." Christopher shook his head and said in a low voice, "I brought this child here because my presbyopia, which had been getting worse for the past few years, suddenly disappeared when I woke up this morning. My eyes suddenly became clear, and I felt as if I was 20 years younger. It wasn't difficult for me to read the accounts anymore. I didn't do anything special these few days. I just like to come to Mammoth and have 2 glasses of rum. Tell me, do you think Mr. Mac cured my eyes?" Everyone looked at Christopher when they heard that. His eyes were indeed clear and clean, unlike the usual cloudy eyes of an old man. Instead, they were as clear as a young man's. They couldn't help but feel puzzled. Could Mr. Mac really be able to cure eyes? Or could it be that drinking rum could clear one's eyes? "I thought it was my illusion at first, but this old man's situation is rather similar to mine. My eyes used to be so blind that I couldn't recognize my own family from 5 steps away, and couldn't differentiate between pigs and dogs from 10 steps away. But when I woke up this morning, my eyes suddenly returned to normal, and I can actually see things from 10 steps away." At this moment, a young man in a long robe with a half-opened book in his hand stepped forward and smiled shyly. "Wow, there's a real case. Looks like Mr. Mac is really good at curing eyes." Everyone looked at the young man, and their eyes lit up. One could be said to be an accident. The 2 customers from Mammoth had their eyes cured at the same time overnight. Obviously, it had something to do with Mr. Mac. Christopher's eyes also lit up when he heard that. He said in surprise, "Could it be that rum can really cure eye diseases? I've been eating at Mr. Mac's place these few days, but I think your deduction might not be very accurate because I've never drunk rum before." The young man shook his head. The young man's words were equivalent to directly excluding rum from the equation. "If it's not rum, then what is it?" Christopher frowned. Vivian, who had been listening at the side for a while, stood up and curled her lips. "Isn't this a very simple deduction question? You and him have been eating at Mammoth these few days, but your eyes suddenly healed when you woke up today. So, you just have to think carefully about what you ate at Mammoth last night. Which one has not been eaten before, and which one has been eaten by both of you last night? The answer will be out." "Roasted pig's eyes. Roasted pig's eyes." Christopher and the young man blurted out almost at the same time. "No pop-up window." Chapter 1634. It was a surprise, but it also made sense. The roasted pig's eyes that had just been released yesterday was indeed the first dish that the two of them thought of. It was also the dish that had left the deepest impression on them. It's actually the roasted pig's eyes that were just released yesterday? An eye for an eye, that sounds like it. That's a little too casual, isn't it? Eating a skewer of roasted pig's eyes can actually cure one's eyes. There was an uproar among the customers when they heard that. Although many people had personally tried the roasted pig's eyes last night and were mesmerized by the special eating experience, most of the customers still stayed away from it. Although I'm not sure if it's the roasted pig's eyes, the dishes I've been eating these days have been more fixed. The roasted pig's eyes should be added on a whim yesterday, Christopher said after some thought. I've also eaten Yangju fried rice for 3 days in a row. I'm not sick of it, but I suddenly wanted to challenge myself yesterday, so I ordered a serving of roasted pig's eyes. The young man smiled a little embarrassedly. If Yangju fried rice doesn't have a specific effect, I think it's probably the roasted pig's eyes. So, if you want to know if Mr. Mac can cure this young man's eyes, all you have to do is order a serving of roasted pig's eyes for him, Vivian concluded. She then looked at Christopher and said seriously, children shouldn't drink alcohol. Rum is a highly concentrated alcohol. Drinking it may cause problems. As the direct beneficiary of the spicy grilled fish, Vivian had no doubt that Mr. Mac's food could have a direct effect on certain illnesses. However, the right medicine, the dish had to be found first. Moreover, she had always thought that this was not a coincidence. It was Mr. Mac's intention. It was said that good medicine was bitter, but Mr. Mac made the medicine so delicious and tempting. He was really a benevolent doctor and the reincarnation of the god of cookery. Yes, I have my concerns too. I wanted to ask Mr. Mac first. After getting confirmation from this young man, I naturally won't let him drink anymore, Christopher said with a nod. Mr. Christopher, isn't this a clinic? Lucy, who was listening in confusion, asked in a low voice. Although she could feel that these people did not have any ill intentions, they did not seem to want to find a doctor to treat Darren. Instead, they wanted him to eat some kind of food here so that Darren's eyes could recover. She was a little puzzled by this. It's like this, young lady. Mammis is a very famous restaurant. My eyes regained their sight after eating some food here, and the same thing happened to that gentleman's eyes. Since Dr. Adolphus couldn't do anything about it, perhaps Mr. Mac can give it a try. After all, he often does incredible things, Christopher explained as he looked at Lucy. Is it food, not medicine? Lucy frowned. She still found it hard to understand. Could a restaurant owner really cure Darren's eyes? Vivian looked at Lucy and comforted her. Don't worry, Mr. Mac is a very good person. The food he makes might really work on your brother's eyes. Many people have already been reborn here. Yes. Lucy looked at the beautiful Vivian, and the trace of uneasiness in her heart gradually calmed down. Since Mr. Christopher brought them here, he must have his reasons. She really didn't know where to bring Darren. Her heart ached every time she saw his disappointed expression. I will confirm with Mr. Mac again later. He made the dish, so he must know it better, Christopher said. Lucy nodded slightly. She had already calmed down. They didn't have to wait for too long before the restaurant's door opened. A handsome chef walked out and welcomed the customers into the restaurant with a smile. Mr. Mac, I have something to ask you. Christopher brought Lucy and Darren to the entrance of the restaurant. He stopped and looked at Meg and said, which of the dishes you make can treat eye diseases? Meg was stunned by this old man's question. This question was a little out of the ordinary, wasn't it? Who would prescribe medicine in a restaurant? He glanced at the young man and young lady standing behind Christopher. The young lady looked to be about 13 or 14 years old. Her skin was yellowish, and she was skinny. Her yellow hair made her look like she had been malnourished for a long time. Her black eyes were looking at him expectantly and timidly. Meanwhile, the young man beside her was only about 10 years old. His complexion looked healthier than hers, but his eyes were deathly white. His little hand was holding the young lady's hand tightly, so he should be blind. "Oh, it's like this. I met this pair of siblings on the road just now. This young man can't see, and Dr. Adolphus can't do anything about it, so I brought them here to ask if you have any ideas," Christopher explained. "It might be more suitable to find a professional doctor to treat eye diseases. After all, I'm just a chef." Meg retracted his gaze from the young man. The omniscient door had already given him feedback on the young man's condition. Darren, male, human, 10 years old. Suffers from severe toxic cataracts. He can't see anything in his eyes. If this condition continues, he will lose his sight completely. This was obviously an illness that he couldn't treat. After all, he was only doing hairdressing now and improving the quality of his nightlife. This level of illness was indeed not easy to treat. Lucy, who was full of anticipation, was disappointed. As expected, it still wasn't possible. "But Mr. Mack, I drank wine and ate roasted pig's eyes at your place yesterday. When I woke up this morning, my presbyopia of more than 10 years was cured." "I don't believe you don't know how to treat eye diseases," Christopher said, shaking his head. "Yes, Mr. Mack. My severe myopia was cured after eating your roasted pig's eyes. I really have to thank you properly." The young man who spoke earlier also looked at Meg gratefully. Because of his eyes, he had been in a lot of awkward situations all these years. His previous girlfriend broke up with him because he mistakenly held someone else's wife's hand on the street. There's such a thing. Meg looked at the two of them and was stunned again. Roasted pig's eyes could actually treat myopia and presbyopia? Using shape to complement shape? Damn, this is too exaggerated, isn't it? System, come out and explain. Meg frowned. He felt that things weren't that simple. The ingredients for roasted pig's eyes were selected from the fiery wild boar's eyes in the active volcano range of Nicola Tower. In order to adapt to the glaring flames of the volcano, the fiery wild boar's eyes are rich in amino acids that the human body needs, as well as a special element. The system has temporarily named it T-serum. It can effectively treat many eye diseases, and the effect will be even better after being roasted. The system's voice quickly sounded in Meg's mind. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1635. T-serum? Are you sure it's not a virus? Meg raised his eyebrows. He was surprised by the system again. He didn't expect the roasted pig's eyes to be able to treat eye diseases. Moreover, it had such an effect because the wild boar had been roasted beside an active volcano for a long time. What was even better was that the effect was even better after being heated and roasted. Wasn't this made for roasting? The system didn't say anything else, but Meg at least confirmed one thing. The roasted pig's eyes did have the effect of treating eye diseases. In that case, he might be able to add a plaque on his door saying Holy Doctor of Ophthalmology in the future. "Mr. Mack, are you not sure yourself?" Christopher looked at Meg and asked, a little worried. Many customers also looked at Meg. Not everyone had eye diseases, but older family members and friends would more or less be unable to see clearly. If the roasted pig's eyes were really effective, then of course, they would bring them here to try it. "I'm a chef. Whether a dish has other effects depends on the person. I won't charge extra for it, and I can't guarantee the effect. If a dish can bring other benefits to the customer besides being delicious, I'll also feel happy," Meg said with a smile. It was a very formal reply, but it was indeed Meg's thoughts. Even if tofu pudding with beautifying effects was sold for 5,000 copper coins, there would still be countless rich women lining up to buy it. Buddha jumps over the wall with anti-hair loss and hair growth effects was sold for 100,000 copper coins, and there would be no lack of customers. Hair transplant costs more than that. However, Meg didn't want to make money. He always felt that he was a chef, and making the dishes delicious was what he should do. As for the special effects, they were given by the ingredients provided by the system. However, they were already included in the cost of the ingredients. He could only earn that much. So, can it be treated or not? Christopher frowned. He felt that Mr. Mack's words seemed to be an answer, but also seemed to be a non-answer. "Please come in. He can try it." Meg looked at the young man with a smile. He was at such a beautiful age. His vision shouldn't be black. Furthermore, the young girl beside him was not in a good condition either. Long-term malnutrition had caused her various physical indicators to light up in red. If she did not improve, it was likely that she would collapse easily. All right. Christopher brought Lucy and Darren into the restaurant and found a seat. After welcoming the guests, Meg turned around and walked towards the kitchen. Boss, can roasted pig's eyes really cure that young man's eyes? It seems to be quite serious, Mia whispered to Meg with a pitiful look on her face. I can't guarantee that. We'll have to wait until he eats it. Meg shook his head. The system only said that it could effectively treat a variety of eye diseases, but it didn't say whether it could treat viral cataracts or whether it had an effect on the boy's eyes. Take the customer's order. The busy business hours have begun again, Meg said with a smile as he walked into the kitchen. Okay, Mia replied as she turned around and walked towards the table where Julian and Crassus were sitting. What a beautiful restaurant. Lucy sat down opposite Christopher with Darren. She looked around carefully, and her eyes shone brightly. This was the most beautiful restaurant she had ever seen in her life. Sister, are we in the restaurant now? Darren asked softly as he leaned closer to Lucy. Although he didn't say a word just now, he was listening attentively. However, he still didn't understand why he was in the restaurant for his treatment, and what was roasted pig's eyes. Was it roasting pig's eyes? Darren suddenly lost his sight when he was 8 years old. Before that, he would often go hunting with his grandfather. His grandfather was the best hunter in the village. He could shoot a wild boar's eye with an arrow. The wild boar that was shot would usually fall after running for a long distance. Even the villagers wouldn't eat the wild boar's eyes. Yes, Mr. Christopher brought us to a very beautiful restaurant. It's like. Lucy pondered seriously for a while. She had never seen such a beautiful restaurant in her and Darren's world. She couldn't help but feel a little anxious. It's like a starry sky without clouds in summer. It's sparkling and comfortable, Christopher said with a smile. Starry sky? A smile appeared at the corner of Darren's mouth. The most beautiful image in the depths of his mind was the clear starry sky. His grandfather had said that one of the stars shining in the dark sky was him. He would always be watching them from the sky. What would you like to order? Yarbemia walked to the left and asked with a smile. I'd like 10 skewers of roasted pig's eyes and 2 plates of Yangju fried rice. The 2 children should be hungry. Christopher flipped open the menu and glanced at the old scar between Lucy's brows. He said, and 2 plates of sweet tofu pudding, 1 plate of husband and wife lung slice, and a glass of rum. All right, please wait a moment. Mia nodded slightly and walked to the next table. What is husband and wife lung slice? Darren asked Lucy softly, feeling a little scared. I don't know, either. Lucy shook her head. It sounded very scary. Could the owner of this restaurant be a strange person? Roasted pig's eyes, and now husband and wife lung slice. Seeing that the 2 children were a little scared, Christopher explained with a smile, the husband and wife lung slice is actually made from various parts of a cow. Mr. Mack is an interesting person, so he gave it an interesting name. The 2 were enlightened when they heard that. Wild cows were wild animals that were not easy to hunt, but they could be eaten for a long time every time they caught one. Ever since their grandfather passed away, they hadn't eaten beef. When they heard about beef, their eyes shone. Let Darren eat a few skewers of roasted pig's eyes later. It might be effective for his eyes, Christopher said with a smile. Okay. Lucy nodded. Although roasted pig's eyes sounded a little scary, as long as it was effective for Darren's eyes, they had to give it a try. Darren pursed his lips slightly, but didn't say anything. Your Yangju fried rice. Not long after, Mia placed 2 plates of Yangju fried rice in front of Darren and Lucy. Wow! Lucy's eyes lit up. Fresh green onions were sprinkled on the colorful fried rice, and the fragrance of eggs mixed with a rich and refreshing aroma assailed her nostrils. The bowl of fried rice, which had both color and smell, looked as if it had been fried out of the rainbow in the sky. It was beautiful and tempting. It smells so good. Darren's nose twitched, and he couldn't help but lean forward. The fragrance wafted over. It was a fragrance that he had never smelled before, and he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. He really wanted to see with his own eyes what was in front of him and why it was emitting such an alluring fragrance. "This is for you. Darren and I can have one." Lucy quickly returned to her senses. She pushed her plate of fried rice in front of Christopher, and picked up the spoon to feed Darren. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1636. I ordered this especially for you guys. You guys probably didn't have a proper meal today, so I ordered something else for myself too. Christopher pushed the fried rice back to Lucy, and looked at her with pity. This little girl was too sensible. Judging from how skinny she was, she definitely hadn't eaten her fill for a long time. "Thank you," Lucy said gratefully. Lucy looked at Christopher, and thanked him gratefully. She scooped up a spoonful of fried rice, and fed it to Darren as she said, "Darren, open your mouth. This fried rice is as colorful as a rainbow." "Rainbow?" Darren's eyes lit up, and he opened his mouth expectantly. As the slightly hot fried rice entered his mouth, the wonderful taste was enveloped by the heat and blossomed in his mouth. As he chewed it carefully, the texture of the rice and the various ingredients was so delicate. All kinds of flavors melted in his mouth, just like a colorful flower blooming in his mouth, making him pleasantly surprised and immersed in it. "These are eggs and an." Darren could only discern the aroma of the eggs. Even the rice had an unfamiliar yet exceptionally sweet taste to it. The wonderful taste lingered in his mouth for a long time, and after swallowing, he felt warm and comfortable all over. "Is it good?" Lucy asked expectantly as she looked at Darren, whose eyes were narrowed in bliss. "Mm. It's really delicious." Darren nodded, and grabbed Lucy's hand. "Big sister, try it too. It's really delicious." "It's all right. I'll eat later. I'll feed you first." Lucy scooped another spoonful of fried rice for Darren with a smile. She hadn't seen such a smile on Darren's face for a long time, ever since her grandfather passed away. It seemed like he really liked this fried rice. Children at this age should be studying in chaos school. They shouldn't have to suffer like this, Christopher thought to himself as he looked at the pair of siblings opposite him. Lucy finished feeding Darren a plate of Yangju fried rice. After he expressed that he was full, she picked up her spoon and started eating. When the warm fried rice entered her mouth, a mist rose in front of her eyes. What a wonderful taste! It was just like her mother's cooking back then. The wild mushrooms in the mountains were fried with wild boar oil, and there was even some diced bacon occasionally. However, after so many years, his mother's appearance had gradually become blurry. That day, she and her father went hunting in the forest as usual, but they never came back. Back then, she was only 5 years old, and Darren had just learned how to walk. When she was young, her grandfather always said that they would come back with big game in the future. However, when her grandfather passed away and she gradually grew up, she already knew that they might never come back. In this world, she only had Darren as her younger brother. After silently finishing a plate of Yangju fried rice, Lucy's eyes were a little wet. She tilted her head and looked at Darren. If his eyes couldn't be cured, she would take care of him for the rest of his life. "Your roasted pig's eyes, sliced beef and ox tongue in chili sauce, and rum." Mia walked over with a tray and placed 2 plates and a glass of rum down gently. "Is this roasted pig's eyes?" Lucy's gaze was quickly attracted by the small mountain of meat skewers on the plate. The pig's eyes that were skewered together and roasted to a brown color were surprisingly not too scary. The surface of the skewers glowed with oil, and they emitted a tempting barbecued meat aroma. Roasted pig's eyes. Darren shrunk his neck. Although this thing might be able to cure his eyes, he was still a little afraid subconsciously. Those wild boars whose eyeballs were pierced by his grandfather had already started to appear in his mind. The scene was a little scary. Yes, this is roasted pig's eyes. Although it sounds a little scary, this is a very delicious dish. Furthermore, my eyes became better after eating this. Christopher nodded with a smile. However, this roasted pig's eyes has just been roasted, so it's very hot inside. You have to wait for a while before eating. Millimeter. Lucy nodded and looked at the roasted pig's eyes expectantly. Although they couldn't guarantee that Darren would recover after eating the roasted pig's eyes, at least this was the first time someone had given them a clear solution since they came to Chaos City. Christopher took a sip of rum and looked at the roasted pig's eyes expectantly as well. Everyone knew that he was the old accountant of Abbott's jewelry shop, but very few people knew that he actually owned 10% of the jewelry shop's shares. He wasn't short of money for a very long time, but some things couldn't be measured by money. For example, the 15-year-old rum brewed by Master Old Sim, or the simple effort of helping a blind child see the light again. Such happiness could not be compared with the 1 million pieces of jewelry sold in the jewelry shop in a day. About 3 minutes later, Christopher picked up a skewer of roasted pig's eyes and bit into one first. He tested it carefully with his teeth and tongue, and only bit into it after making sure that it was a temperature that his mouth could withstand. The warm liquid exploded in his mouth, and a wonderful feeling blossomed. His anticipation and anxiety were released at this moment, and it was a delightful feeling. Christopher swallowed the roasted pig's eye in his mouth and smiled at Lucy. "Come, let your brother have a taste of the game that he can't taste anywhere else. But you must be careful when you eat. Close your mouth when you bite the eyeball, and don't let the precious liquid spill out." Millimeter. Lucy picked up a skewer of roasted pig's eyes and passed it to Darren as she said, "Darren, open your mouth. Bite the first roasted pig's eye like how you eat candied haws in the morning." Millimeter. Darren answered, and opened his mouth obediently. He waited for Lucy to feed the pig's eye into his mouth before closing his mouth and removing the pig's eye from the skewer. When the roasted pig's eye entered his mouth, what surprised Darren wasn't the slippery and sticky texture. Instead, it tasted like roasted meat. The skin was slightly charred, but when he touched it with his teeth, it felt like a bulging fish bubble. It was very elastic. Yes, hold it in your mouth, and then try to bite it open gently with your teeth. Remember, don't use too much force. Otherwise, you won't be able to control your mouth, and you won't be able to keep all the liquid in your mouth, Christopher reminded. Upon hearing that, Darren tried to bite the pig's eye with his teeth. However, the skin of the pig's eye was tough and elastic. It was like a mischievous little fellow scurrying around in his mouth. He was a little afraid that the eyeball would explode in his mouth, but he was also a little excited to see what it would feel like after it exploded. Would it really allow his eyes to see again? Amidst his anxiety and anticipation, the mischievous pig's eye was finally caught by his teeth, and was bitten open. PFFF, the sound of the eyeball exploding rang out clearly in his mind. It made his soul tremble. However, before he could think about it carefully, the slightly hot liquid had already splattered around in his mouth. If not for Christopher's repeated reminders, he definitely wouldn't have been able to close his mouth in time. The slightly sticky and delicious soup grabbed all his attention. It was a little like bone soup, but it was countless times thicker and tastier than the bone soup he had tasted before. It stimulated his taste buds and brought him an incomparable pleasure. He felt as if his mind had been emptied out. His anxiety and anticipation received the most perfect feedback at this moment. After swallowing the liquid, he started to chew on the remaining things. Within the tough skin of the eyeball, there was something that was as crispy as bone. The more he chewed, the more fragrant the skin became. It also made him feel happy. Furthermore, what made Darren even more surprised was that a refreshing coolness gathered towards his eyes. His eyes that were shrouded in darkness actually showed signs of breaking through. "Big sister Anna, do you think that big brother's eyes will become better?" Amy sat behind the counter with Ugly Duckling in her arms as she looked in Darren's direction. "I think so. Uncle Meg is super awesome." Anna nodded with certainty. "Haha, I think so too." Chapter 1637. How is it? Darren, do you feel anything? Lucy asked as she looked at Darren expectantly. She felt as if her heart had leaped into her throat. Christopher was also staring at Darren. Although he didn't expect much from Darren, who had just eaten a roasted pig's eye, He still wanted to know if there was any obvious effect. Darren tried to feel it seriously, and shook his head. I feel a cooling sensation in my eyes, but I still can't see. You still can't see? Lucy was slightly disappointed. Don't be anxious. You just ate one. Come, eat the remaining 9 skewers. My eyes only recovered after I went home to sleep. No matter how good the medicine is, it still needs time to take effect, Christopher said with a smile. Also, there's a cooling sensation in your eyes, which means that the roasted pig's eyes are working. After this meal, let's have another meal tonight. Millimeter. Lucy and Darren nodded at the same time with smiles on their faces. Lucy carefully fed the remaining roasted pig's eyes to Darren. With the experience from the first one, Darren caught the pig's eye very quickly, and chewed on it happily. Is it really that delicious? Lucy looked on doubtfully from the side. She could clearly hear the sound of the eyeball being crushed by Darren. She could even imagine the terrifying scene of the liquid splattering everywhere in his mouth. However, Darren looked as if he was enjoying the process very much. Not long after, Darren finished all 9 skewers of roasted pig's eyes. Burp! Darren burped. After eating a plate of Yeongju fried rice and so many roasted pig's eyes, he felt a little bloated. What surprised him was that wisps of coldness gathered in his eyes, as if countless rays of light were trying to pierce through the layers of darkness. His vision, which was originally as dark as ink, seemed to have an additional layer of faintly discernible white. However, the intertwining of black and white was like a whirlpool, making him feel a little dizzy. His eyes started to want to close subconsciously. He felt like he could fall asleep immediately if he was given a bed. Darren, are you all right? Lucy asked concernedly when she noticed Darren's abnormality. Sister, I'm fine. I just feel very sleepy. I want to sleep. Darren shook his head and yawned as he fell sideways towards Lucy. Darren. Lucy hurriedly reached out to support Darren as she called out in a panic. He's fine. He's just asleep. Just bring him back to sleep until he wakes up. Elizabeth happened to walk to the side, and reached out to tap Darren's forehead gently as she looked at Lucy. But Lucy still couldn't understand why Darren would suddenly fall asleep, as if he had fainted. Don't worry. The roasted pig's eyes must have taken effect. Look at how soundly he's sleeping. His breathing is even. He doesn't look like there's any problem at all. He finished the rest of the rum in his hand, and got up to help Lucy carry Darren. As they walked towards the door, he said, Let's go back to my house first and let this child have a good sleep. Then I'll have to trouble you. Lucy said gratefully. She carried most of Darren's weight on her shoulders and slowly walked towards the door. After they got into the horse-drawn carriage, Lucy laid Darren flat on the seat. She listened to his soft snoring, and it was indeed no different from when he was sleeping normally. Only then did she feel relieved. She looked at Christopher, who was sitting at the side, and asked, Old sir, will Darren's eyes recover after he wakes up? I can't guarantee it now, but judging from his reaction, the roasted pig's eyes should still be effective. Christopher shook his head as he looked at Darren, who was sleeping peacefully. He also hoped that this young boy's eyes would be able to see again after he woke up. Oh, yes. Old sir, I'll give you the money for our meal and the roasted pig's eyes now. Lucy took out a money pouch that was sewn from rags, and poured out a pile of coins. Most of them were copper coins, with over 10 silver coins and 2 gold coins mixed in. This is the money that the villagers gathered for Darren's treatment. I don't know if it's enough. If it's not enough, I will find a job in Chaos City in the next few days, and work to return the money to you. Lucy held all the coins with both hands, and looked at Christopher with clear eyes. Christopher looked at Lucy's clear eyes. This should be the first time this young lady left the village to bring her younger brother to Chaos City. After pondering for a while, he took a gold coin and a copper coin from Lucy's hands, and smilingly said, These are enough. That's all. Lucy was a little uncertain. She couldn't read, so she didn't know what was written on the menu. She didn't need to use money in the village, so she didn't have much of a concept of money. However, she could tell that this restaurant definitely cost a lot. Yes. Christopher nodded. Thank you. Lucy put the rest of the money back into the money pouch and kept it carefully with her. These were all gathered by the villagers, so she had to return them when she got back. Along the way, Christopher asked about Lucy and Darren briefly, and found out that the two children had already become orphans. He couldn't help but pity them even more. The horse-drawn carriage stopped, and Christopher stood up. "Let's alight. We've reached my house. Bring Darren to have a rest. You should have a good rest too." The coachman helped Darren off the carriage, and the butler brought them straight to the guest room. In the luxurious manor, there were rows upon rows of buildings. Lucy followed behind the butler and scanned her surroundings carefully. She didn't expect Mr. Christopher's house to be so spacious. There were even more houses than in the village. "I heard from them that you brought two children home. What's the matter?" the old lady asked as soon as Christopher entered the room. She came forward to greet him. Christopher pulled the old mistress into the house and said, "I met two poor children on my way back from the goldsmith's shop this morning. It's really not easy at such a young age." The old mistress couldn't help but sigh after hearing Christopher's words. She wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and was about to stand up. "I'll go take a look at those two children. Let them rest first. They probably didn't have much rest on the way here." Christopher pulled her back and shook his head with a smile. "However, I'm afraid Dorothy won't be happy if you let that little girl wear her clothes. You know her temper," the old mistress said worriedly. "That temper of hers is all because of you two. I'm still the one in charge in this family now. No matter which generation it is, they have to be educated. Otherwise, even if they have some money, they won't last long," Christopher said with a straight face. The old mistress didn't dare to say anything else. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1638. Lucy had fallen asleep beside Darren's bed. Although her position wasn't very comfortable, lying on the warm and comfortable blanket was still the best sleep she had in the past few days. Even her shoulder that had been scratched by the vines seemed to have recovered quite a bit, and the pain had mostly disappeared. "Sister. Sister." Lucy heard Darren's voice while she was in a daze. "Darren." Lucy looked up immediately and met Darren's eyes. Most of the white in Darren's deathly white eyes had actually disappeared, and they regained some of their black color and clarity. His expression was also one of surprise and surprise. I can see you." "I can see sister," Darren said in surprise as tears glistened in his eyes. Although his vision was still a little blurry, the heavy black fog had already disappeared, and only a thin layer of fog was left. However, he could already see Lucy, who was close to the bed. It was a little blurry, but at least he could see her clearly. "Really? You can really see me? Darren, is what you said true?" Lucy stood up immediately and grabbed Darren's shoulders agitatedly. "Millimeter, I can see sister. Sister has become prettier," Darren said with a nod as a smile appeared on his face. "That's great, that's really great." Lucy hugged Darren tightly as her tears fell uncontrollably. She sobbed, "If Grandpa knew, he would definitely be very happy. He will know. Grandpa said that he has become a star. I will tell him tonight," Darren said with a choked voice. The siblings hugged each other and cried. "Knock, knock." There was a knock on the door, followed by Christopher's voice. "Are you awake? We are going out to eat. It's Mr. Christopher." Lucy hurriedly wiped the tears off her face, and then looked at Darren seriously. "We must thank Mr. Christopher and the owner of that restaurant properly later. They were the ones who cured your eyes." "Millimeter. Darren nodded obediently. "Let's go out." Lucy stood up from the bed and watched as Darren put on his clothes. He got off the bed clumsily and put on his shoes. She then held his hand and walked towards the door. "Grandpa, did you really give my custom-made clothes and shoes to someone else?" Beside Christopher, a young girl draped in a white mink fur cloak asked with a frown, clearly a little unhappy. "Dorothy, I've already told you that I've given the clothes and shoes to those who need them. It's my fault for not discussing this with you. I'll get the tailor to make another set for you, but if you don't behave properly later, you'll only be able to wear old clothes next year." Christopher looked at the young lady beside him. You should know that this lady very graciously rejected your cloak. This is my favorite mink cloak. I've been looking forward to it for a whole year. It seems that the lady is not bad. Dorothy raised her brow when she heard that. Her wardrobe was almost full of normal clothes and shoes, and that old-fashioned tailor would make the same clothes and shoes every year. She didn't even have to guess to know that it would be a bright red dress and bright red shoes. Actually, she had been eyeing Suede's new products recently. She had already used her pocket money to order the latest down jacket. It was a handsome black down jacket, and it would arrive in 3 days. This was her first time snatching Suede's new products. She was simply too blissful. Hence, when Grandpa said that he had given her custom-made clothes to someone else, she was only a little unhappy that her things were disposed of without her consent, but she didn't feel too bad. On the contrary, if the other party was really someone who needed it, she actually didn't mind giving the clothes and shoes that she didn't really like to them. Grandpa said that they were a pair of siblings who came to Chaos City from a remote mountain village to seek treatment. It did sound quite pitiful. The door opened very quickly. Lucy walked out holding Darren's hand. Dorothy looked at Lucy. She was wearing a bright red and green dress, and a pair of red leather boots. They fit her rather well, just as she had expected. The girl should be about the same age as her. She had delicate features, but looked very frail. Her face was pale, and her lips were a little pale. Her bluish-yellow hair was tied messily behind her head, and her bright eyes seemed to be a little red from crying just now. Just one look was all it took for Dorothy's unhappiness to disappear completely. This girl did look like she really needed help. It was just a set of clothes and a pair of shoes. Moreover, she even gave her the cloak. Dorothy started to like Lucy a lot more. Lucy also noticed Dorothy, who was standing beside Christopher. They were about the same age, so she should be the granddaughter that Mr. Christopher was talking about. Dorothy was very beautiful. She had a head of soft golden hair, snow-white skin, and a slender neck. She was as noble and elegant as a white swan. She was wearing a blue dress, and the white cloak she was wearing looked a little familiar. It seemed to be the one that Mr. Christopher wanted to give her this afternoon. Should the clothes and shoes I'm wearing belong to her? Lucy suddenly felt a little embarrassed. It was as if she had snatched someone else's beloved things. She couldn't wait to take off the clothes and return them to her. Wow, look at Darren's eyes. The white color has faded a lot. Can you see things now? Christopher asked excitedly. Millimeter. I can see things that are close to me now. Darren nodded, and bowed deeply to Christopher. He looked up at him, and gratefully said, "Thank you, Mr. Christopher. You're welcome. It's great to be able to help you." Christopher helped Darren up, and smilingly said, "It seems like the roasted pig's eyes are very effective for your eyes. Let's set off now. We'll eat 10 more skewers of roasted pig's eyes tonight. Maybe your eyes will be completely healed tomorrow morning. Thank you so much." Lucy also looked at Christopher gratefully. "You're welcome." Christopher waved his hand, and smilingly introduced, "I forgot to introduce her to you. This is my granddaughter, Dorothy. She's the same age as you, Lucy. The 4 of us will go to Amy's for dinner tonight. Hello, I'm Dorothy." Dorothy went forward, and greeted them with a smile. "Hello, I'm Lucy," Lucy said shyly. She grabbed the hem of her dress nervously. After hesitating for a while, she mustered her courage, and said, "I'll return the clothes to you as soon as possible. I'll wash my clothes immediately, and then, oh, that's okay. I think it looks better on you than on me." Dorothy smiled at Lucy, and extended her hand. "Let's be friends. In that case, you can wear my clothes, and I can wear yours." Lucy looked at Dorothy's hand, and then at the clean and gentle smile on her face. She hesitated for a while, but still extended her hand. "Let's go. I'll get you a coat. It's a little cold to only wear a dress." Dorothy grabbed Lucy's hand, and walked out. This child. Christopher looked at Dorothy's back view, and shook his head with a smile. He also held Darren's little hand, and said, "Let's go. We'll wait for them in the carriage." Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1639. Jason, I specially asked 2 customers to postpone their treatment until tomorrow. Tell me, what's so urgent that you're looking for me for? Adolphus asked the middle-aged man with a full beard sitting opposite him in the horse-drawn carriage. Jason sighed, and softly said, Yes, our Dr. Adolphus is the best ophthalmologist in Chaos City. He's a super busy man. Even if this good brother of mine wants to ask you out for a drink, he has to inform you half a month in advance, and he has to undergo a strict interrogation once he gets in the carriage. You're just looking for me for a drink? Adolphus frowned. Why didn't you say so earlier? I'll come out with you after I see those 2 patients. The last 2 patients' conditions are not urgent at all. I've already asked around for you. It's fine to come back tomorrow. Jason waved his hand nonchalantly, and said, However, if we're late, we won't be able to have a drink. Are there any pubs that won't let you in? Adolphus was in disbelief. He knew that this brother of his who grew up with him came from a wealthy family. He often spent a lot of money in pubs, and was the boss' favorite customer. Jason chuckled, and said, Don't doubt me. If we're late, they really won't let you in. However, it's not that they won't let you in. It's just that there are too many people in front of you, and you won't even get your turn. There's still such a popular pub in Chaos City. Look, your sister-in-law is always taking care of you. She even arranges your meals clearly. You don't know anything about it. Jason looked at Adolphus with disdain. It's not a pub. It's a restaurant, Mammis. It's the most popular and reputable restaurant in Chaos City now. You haven't heard of it, right? Mammis? Never heard of it. Adolphus shook his head. He then looked at Jason suspiciously, and said, But, didn't you say that those who drink in restaurants are fools, and that they can only enjoy themselves in pubs? Ahem, that's what I said when I was young and frivolous. Who knew that there would be a restaurant like Mammis in this world? Jason coughed dryly to cover up his embarrassment, and then said, You don't know how delicious Mr. Mac's food is. That spicy grilled fish is the best dish to go with wine, and the beef kebab is also invincible. Of course, the best thing about them is their beer. It's cold and refreshing, and it makes all the pubs in Chaos City look like trash. Not to mention the 15-year-old rum that their family recently launched. Do you know who made it? Old Sim, the father of rum. Oh my God, 1 cup only costs 1,000 copper coins. Drinking 1 cup is 1 cup less. A 15-year-old rum brewed by Old Sim? Adolphus's eyes lit up when he heard that. Jason had bought a bottle of Old Sim's 3-year-old rum at an auction 2 years ago at a high price, and he brought it to his place to drink. He still couldn't forget the taste until now. He didn't expect there to be a restaurant selling a 15-year-old rum. It was simply unimaginable. Yes. I don't know where Mr. Mac got it from. Ever since Old Sim passed away, it's not easy to find this kind of rum, even in the Fork tribe. Jason nodded. He was also puzzled. Seems like the owner of this restaurant is not simple, Adolphus said thoughtfully. He's definitely not simple. Mr. Mac is simply a god. Not only is his food delicious, but he also knows how to treat illnesses. Oh, he's a doctor. Adolphus was shocked. You can't really call him a doctor, but according to what I heard, a woman's skin would become smooth and tender after eating his tofu pudding. It also has a very good scar-removing effect. Even some of the old mercenaries, after eating tofu pudding for half a month, their old scars had all disappeared, and their skin had become white and tender. In order not to be laughed at by the newbies, some people even started to draw scars on themselves recently. 2 days ago, I even overheard a few mercenaries at the next table exchanging their experiences while eating tofu pudding, Jason said with a chuckle. There's such a thing. Adolphus frowned. It sounded like a scammer on the streets who found actors to scam people. As a doctor, he hated such people the most. Not only did they cheat the patients of their money, but they also delayed the patient's treatment time. Not only does it whiten and beautify the skin, Mammis also has a magical soup Buddha jumps over the wall. As long as you drink that soup, even if you're bald for life, you can still grow hair back. One serving only costs 10,000 copper coins. Jason was talking excitedly. He suddenly slapped his head as he looked at Adolphus, and said, "Oh yes, Mr. Mac just launched a new dish yesterday, roasted pig's eyes. This afternoon, a few customers said that their eye diseases were cured after eating it. This afternoon, an old man even brought a young boy with an eye disease here to eat it. I wonder if it's effective. If it's really effective, I'm afraid Mr. Mac will start to snatch your business." Adolphus' eyes widened when he heard that, and he raised his voice as he said, "Are you talking about a 10-year-old boy who has an older sister who is 12 or 13 years old? Hey, how did you know? They came to look for you." Jason was a little surprised. That boy's eye disease is very strange, and it's very serious, so I didn't dare to treat him carelessly. I could only ask them to find someone else, Adolphus said with a sullen face. But I didn't expect that old man to bring them to the restaurant to treat their illness. It's really ridiculous. Such a scam could ruin a child's eyes in future. It's not as serious as you say, right? Mr. Mac is a good person. He wouldn't do something like scam. When Jason saw Adolphus' serious expression, he stopped laughing, and said uncertainly, "You're not thinking of creating trouble, are you? If he uses the gimmick of delicacies to deceive patients, I'll definitely destroy this restaurant," Adolphus said with a firm expression. "Good boy, this is a restaurant that even the Castellan occasionally visits. How can it be a scam? You have to calm down." Jason was a little uneasy. If he can even deceive a blind child, even if the Castellan supports him, it can't hide his nature as a scammer. Adolphus looked at Jason, and his tone was a little calmer. "Don't worry, I'm not one of those hotheads. I'll act according to the situation." "That's good. But let me remind you first. These so-called curative effects were discovered by the customers by accident. Mr. Mac has never, and completely doesn't need to, use this as a selling point of the restaurant. He also didn't increase the price because of this. We're here to drink 15-year-old rum today. Remember that, okay?" Jason reminded him with a serious face. "Okay." Adolphus responded casually. He was already determined in his heart that if he met that boy again later, he must take him away. He thought about it for the whole day, and perhaps there were a few ways to try. Even if it couldn't completely restore his vision, it could at least control the deteriorating condition of his eyes. No pop-up window. Chapter 1640. Jason and the rest were not late, but there was still a long line in front of Amy's. "How is it? I didn't lie to you, did I? Amy's has such a long line every day. If you're late, you won't be able to eat it." Jason jumped off the horse-drawn carriage, and smiled at the surprised Adolphus. "These are all people here to see the doctor." Adolphus was indeed very surprised. Was the scale of this restaurant scam already so exaggerated? And it was right under the eyes of the city lord's castle and right next to the Bastille prison. What are you thinking? Of course, they're all here to eat. Jason didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He suddenly regretted talking too much on the way here. He urged, "Let's go. Let's hurry to the back of the line. According to the current number of people, we won't be able to eat the tofu pudding, so we don't have to worry about which flavor to eat." Adolphus followed Jason to the back of the line while sizing up the guests in the line. Humans, elves, demons, orcs. Almost every race could be seen, which made him feel even more depressed. It seemed that the humans were not the only ones who had fallen into the trap. However, what surprised him was that the mental state of these customers seemed to be the same as those gloomy patients he usually saw. As an old doctor who had been practicing medicine for more than 30 years, he boasted that he could tell a person's physical condition from their mental state. Overall, these people did not seem like regular patients. Furthermore, judging from their clothes, many of them should be considered as the upper class of Chaos City. They were not cheap, so how could they be deceived by such low-level means? Could it be that what Jason said was true? However, when he walked past them, he heard that those people seemed to be divided into two factions, arguing over whether the sweet tofu pudding was better or the savory tofu pudding was better. He was even more certain that this was a scam restaurant. This boss even brainwashed these customers. This is too much, too scary. Standing in the line, Adolphus looked left and right with a heavy heart, but he still couldn't find the siblings. He didn't know if they had realized that they had been scammed. Not long after, the restaurant's door opened, and a young man with a light mustache stood at the door with a group of beautiful waitresses to welcome the customers into the restaurant. This is the boss. He looks very young. He doesn't look like an old chef, nor does he look like an old doctor. How can he be so good at both? Adolphus looked at Meg, feeling more and more confused. However, this young boss seemed to have a good relationship with the customers. He was able to call out the names of most of the customers and greet them familiarly. He was kind and amiable throughout the whole process, which made people have a good impression of him. "Mr. Mack, is there still a rum bar today?" Jason looked at Meg with a familiar smile. "We don't have much left. Drink and cherish it." Meg laughed. He wasn't lying. Of the 10 barrels of rum he took out, there were only 4 barrels left. It was estimated that they would run out tomorrow or the day after. Then they would have to wait for Hannah's distillery to be completed and start brewing new rum. So fast. Jason and the surrounding customers who came for the rum all sighed. However, after thinking about it, they felt a little lucky. At least they had drunk a few glasses these days. Such good wine was hard to come by. Jason took Adolphus to find a place to sit at the door and shared a table with 2 of his drinking buddies. Jason chatted with them for a while. Seeing that Adolphus's face was still serious, he didn't introduce them to each other. When the dishes were served, they would naturally become familiar with each other after drinking a few more glasses. "I don't see them coming," Adolphus said softly. "Maybe they have been cured, so they don't have to come," Jason replied casually. He hoped that the siblings would not come tonight. He was really worried that his brother, who had been serious since childhood, would take this matter seriously. If he was blacklisted by the restaurant, he would have nowhere to cry. "Wow, what a beautiful restaurant. Grandpa, why didn't you bring me here earlier?" "Me." Just then, a clear voice sounded at the door. Adolphus looked back subconsciously and saw a group of 4 people walking in from the door. The leader was a young girl wearing a white mink cloak. That mink cloak was obviously expensive, but that didn't stop Adolphus's gaze. He looked directly at the old man who came in with the young girl, and his eyes widened a little. This was the old man who took the siblings away in the morning, and the people who came in with them were the siblings who came to seek medical treatment. However, the 2 of them had changed their tattered clothes into new ones, and their messy hair had been tidied up, so they didn't look as pitiful as before. What really shocked Adolphus was the young man's eyes. His eyes, which were originally covered with an unknown white substance, had regained some of their original color, as if a layer of white had been scraped off. And he walked over by himself. Although his steps weren't fast, he was obviously in a state where he could see things. How is this possible? Adolphus was so shocked that he almost stood up from his chair. He believed that he didn't recognize the wrong person. Even if the young man changed his clothes, the young man was still the same young man. The white in his eyes that hadn't faded away proved that point. But what was going on? It had only been half a day, and his eyes were almost blind. How did they recover so obviously? "Isn't this that young man? He can see." Jason couldn't help but exclaim when he noticed the young man who came in. Many customers who were waiting for their dishes to be served looked towards the door when they heard that. Their gazes landed on Lucy and Darren. When they saw Darren walk in by himself, and his eyes that had regained some clarity, it instantly caused a small commotion. Christopher had brought this child to seek medical treatment this afternoon, and it had attracted a lot of attention. Everyone watched him finish 10 skewers of roasted pig's eyes, and they were all looking forward to seeing if his eyes could recover. They didn't expect him to be able to walk by himself tonight. "That's great. Mr. Mack has done a good deed again. Can roasted pig's eyes really treat eye diseases? This is real, isn't it? It's not just a treatment. It's a miracle medicine. I'll bring my 7th uncle here to eat roasted pig's eyes tomorrow." He couldn't see for the past few days, and he kept calling me Little Six every day. The customers discussed softly, and were sincerely happy that the child's eyes had recovered. Young man, can your eyes really see? Adolphus stood up to stop Darren, and asked in surprise and doubt. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1641. Darren looked at Adolphus and pondered for a while. His eyes lit up, and he asked, "You're the doctor from this morning?" "Yes." Adolphus nodded. From the way Darren's eyes focused, he could indeed see. Darren nodded with a shy smile. "Yes, my eyes can see some things now. Although it's still a little blurry, I can really see." "I'm sorry, doctor. We still have to trouble you to look after our sleigh. We forgot to collect it this afternoon," Lucy said to Adolphus with a look of embarrassment. Lucy looked at Adolphus embarrassedly. She had forgotten about the sleigh in the afternoon because Darren had fallen asleep in a hurry. "It's all right. I've kept the sleigh for you." Adolphus waved his hand. What was important now was not the sleigh, but this young man's eyes. How did he recover his vision in just one afternoon? Even if he only recovered part of his vision, it was still unbelievable. "Pardon me for asking, but which doctor did you find to treat your eyes?" Adolphus asked Darren. He already had a guess, but he found it hard to believe. "I didn't find a doctor. Mr. Christopher brought me to this restaurant to eat the roasted pig's eyes. After that, I went back to sleep, and I could see when I woke up." Darren shook his head. He looked past the crowd and towards the kitchen. He saw Meg, who was busy in the kitchen. Although his vision was a little blurry, his eyes still lit up immediately. "It's him. He's the one who cured my eyes. Indeed, it's roasted pig's eyes." Adolphus suddenly felt his throat dry up. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. Half of it was because he was happy that this young man's eyes could see again after being cured, and the other half was because he couldn't really explain it himself. As an ophthalmologist with 30 years of experience, and known as the best ophthalmologist in Chaos City, he had his own pride. However, an eye disease that even he couldn't do anything about was cured by a restaurant owner with just 10 skewers of roasted pig's eyes. This feeling of defeat was even more unacceptable than being defeated by other doctors. Isn't that Dr. Adolphus? Yes. He's the best ophthalmologist in Chaos City. He has cured countless patients with eye diseases. I didn't expect him to come to Amy's for a meal too. Many people recognized Adolphus, and some familiar people greeted him. However, not many people noticed the disappointment on his face. "Dr. Adolphus." Christopher turned around and greeted Adolphus with a smile. Just as he was about to explain Darren's situation to him, he saw that Adolphus's expression was a little unnatural. He thought about it, and understood. Instead, he said, "What a coincidence. You're here for dinner too. Let's talk next time. I'll bring the children to sit at the side first. There aren't many seats left." "All right, talk to you later." Adolphus glanced at Christopher gratefully before returning to his seat. "You can rest assured now. This child's eyes will definitely recover. Don't worry about it. Mr. Mack is a good man. Of course, he's also a genius." Jason saw that Adolphus's expression was a little unnatural, so he smiled and patted him on the shoulder to comfort him. "You know that I'm not the kind of person who is jealous of other people's talents," Adolphus said seriously. "If you were that kind of person, wouldn't I have been chopped to death by you 100 times? You don't have that kind of plaything." Adolphus rolled his eyes with a smile. All right. Let's not talk about this. Let's talk about this rum. How many glasses do you want to drink tonight? Mr. Mack never lies. If he said there's not much left, then it's definitely not going to be sold for a few days. 1 glass is 1 glass less." Jason changed the topic. "Then I'll definitely have a few more glasses. Don't blame me for not reminding you. The strength of this 15-year-old rum is no joke. With my alcohol tolerance, I'll be drunk after 2.5 glasses. Furthermore, I'll have to be carried out of the house." Adolphus thought seriously for a while, and said, Then I'll have 1.5 glasses. All right, then we'll have 4 glasses in total. Jason nodded. He opened the menu and pushed it in front of Adolphus. Come, order the dishes that go with the wine. Adolphus looked at the menu. It was painted with vivid colors that resembled real dishes. His gaze quickly landed on the roasted pig's eyes. Roasted pig's eyes, 300 copper coins per skewer. 300 copper coins could buy a huge pig's trotter in Chaos City, and it was enough for a whole family to have 2 meals. 300 copper coins for a skewer of roasted pig's eyes was not cheap. However, since this roasted pig's eyes could treat such a serious eye disease, it was not too much to sell it for 300 copper coins a skewer. He had seen many patients who were willing to fork out all their wealth in exchange for their sight. If their eye disease could be treated by eating roasted pig's eyes, they would be willing to pay 3,000 copper coins or even 30,000 copper coins, let alone 300 copper coins a skewer. You want to try this? Jason saw that Adolphus's gaze was fixed on the roasted pig's eyes. He smiled and said, I saw them having a good time yesterday. Why don't we order a few skewers to try today? Can normal customers who don't have eye diseases order it too? Adolphus asked uncertainly. Of course. Mr. Mack didn't say that this could treat eye diseases in the first place. It was the customers who discovered it today. Just like those ladies who came to eat tofu pudding because they wanted to become more beautiful, they might not be able to compete with those tough men in front of them. After all, tofu pudding is so delicious that it doesn't matter if it's male or female. Just the taste alone is already worth it. It doesn't matter if it has any beautifying effects, Jason said with a smile. A snack that costs 200 copper coins per serving is worth it too? Adolphus glanced at the price of the tofu pudding. You can ask the waiter if we still have a chance to eat tofu pudding later. I strongly recommend that you eat sweet tofu pudding. It's even better than eating candy, Jason recommended seriously. Yarbemia happened to turn to their table and asked with a smile, Hello, what would you like to order? We'd like 4 glasses of rum, 2 skewers of roasted pig's eyes, and a medium spicy grilled fish. Jason ordered quickly, and then asked, Oh, yes. Is there any tofu pudding today? Yes, but there aren't many tofu puddings left for both flavors. MIA nodded with a smile. That's great. We'd like 2 sweet tofu puddings. Jason made the decision for Adolphus without hesitation. He then looked at him and asked, Is there anything else you want to eat? That's all for now. Adolphus glanced at the spicy grilled fish that Jason ordered. This amount should be enough for the 2 of them, so he closed the menu casually. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1642. Darren sized up the restaurant with curiosity in his eyes. Just like what his sister had said, this restaurant was very beautiful. It was like a starry sky. The bright and comfortable lights, and the beautiful tables and chairs were all novel to him. However, the way the various races sat together in the restaurant made him a little fearful. For example, there were a few demons at the table next to him whose bodies were covered with crisscrossing lava cracks. Although they were smiling kindly at him, he still felt tremendous pressure because he had never seen demons since he was young. This restaurant is so interesting. There are actually customers from all races, just like our school, Dorothy said excitedly as she looked around. She often went to high-end restaurants with her parents or grandfather, but most restaurants would have a special distinction. Some were only open to humans and elves, while others were only open to orcs and dwarfs. There were very few restaurants that accommodated all races, let alone elves and demons. However, everything was realized here. All the races sat together harmoniously, especially in the designated hot pot area next door. There was actually a table with customers from all the races squeezed together. If not for the 9-grid hot pot in the middle, it would look like a meeting of all the races had started in advance. Yes, this is Boss's true ability. Christopher also nodded with a smile. He was really convinced today. Even Adolphus couldn't do anything about the eye disease, but after eating Mr. Mack's 10 portions of roasted pig's eyes, he could actually see again. It would be a pity if he didn't open a clinic with this ability. Christopher opened the menu and placed it in the middle of the table with a smile, and said, "Then let's order 10 portions of roasted pig's eyes for Darren later. You guys can order whatever you want to eat. I heard there are many delicious things on the menu." Lucy and Darren remained reserved and didn't move. Dorothy generously chose a few dishes that she thought looked good, and then turned the menu to Lucy and Darren. She smiled and said, "I've chosen. You guys can order a few more. Order whatever you want. Don't stand on ceremony. Grandpa will pay the bill anyway. We don't need it. You've already ordered a lot. It should be enough for us. It would be a waste to order more." Lucy shook her head slightly. "It's okay. Maybe there's something bad in the food I ordered," Dorothy said nonchalantly. Christopher looked at Dorothy sternly and said, "Dorothy, it's not good to waste food. Furthermore, this restaurant is different from other restaurants. If you waste food, you'll be blacklisted, and you won't be allowed to enter again." "Oh." Dorothy shrugged and said innocently, "Grandpa, I also cherish food, okay? I always finish all the food at school. The ones who don't cherish food are the chefs who make terrible food. If the food is so bad that the customers can't finish it, then they're the ones who are wasting food." Christopher thought about it seriously and said, "You do have a point. No matter if it tastes good or not, we should finish the food, right?" Lucy said softly but firmly, "Yes." Darren nodded in agreement. During the cold winters in the village, if the harvest wasn't good, they would even eat tree roots. As long as there was food, it was enough. It didn't matter if it tasted good or not. What was important was whether it could fill their stomachs and support them through the cold nights. Christopher and Dorothy looked at Lucy and her brother in a daze for a while. They suddenly realized something, and nodded at the same time. "Yes, it's not good to waste food. Let's order as much as we can eat." Dorothy nodded. Then, she flipped open the menu again and removed some of the food she ordered. She passed the menu to Lucy and Darren with a smile, and said, "Now, you can order 2 more dishes that don't look too full. Sister, I still want to eat the fragrant fried rice from lunch. Is that okay?" Darren asked softly as he looked at Lucy. He missed the taste of the Yangju fried rice. He still wanted to see that beautiful, rainbow-like dish with his own eyes. "Then we'll just have the fried rice from lunch." Lucy pushed the menu back to Dorothy. "In that case, should we try this ice cream? It looks like a pretty good dessert," Dorothy said as she pointed at the ice cream on the menu. "The 3 of you can have one each. I saw other children eating ice cream the last time, and they said it was pretty good." Christopher decided for them with a smile. Yarbemia happened to turn to their table, so Christopher ordered the children's food, as well as the rum and beef kebabs that he wanted. "Please wait a moment." Yarbemia looked at Darren's eyes, and turned to walk into the kitchen with a smile. "The service staff here are so pretty. All of them are super pretty," Dorothy said softly as she looked at Christopher. Dorothy said softly as she looked at Christopher with some resentment. "Grandpa, you actually hid such a good restaurant and didn't bring me here. You've really disappointed me. Aren't I bringing you here?" Christopher didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Boss, that young man can really see. The roasted pig's eyes are amazing," Mia said in surprise when she entered the kitchen and saw Meg, who was roasting the pig's eyes seriously. "It's pretty good." Meg also had a smile on his face. He had already seen Darren's medical report when they came in. He smiled and said, "The toxicity of the toxic cataract has mostly subsided. Next, he just needs to take 10 skewers of roasted pig's eyes for a course of treatment. He'll be completely healed after about 3 courses." "Hey, that's not right. Why does it feel like I'm prescribing medicine? Boss, why are you so familiar with this?" Yarbemia was also surprised. As a qualified chef, I should have a deep understanding of the food I'm cooking. Only then can I prevent myself from prescribing the wrong medicine. No, I mean, serving the wrong dish," Meg explained calmly. "Oh." Yarbemia nodded thoughtfully. She didn't really understand what Meg was talking about, either. Anyway, it was fine as long as the boss was awesome. "By the way, Did Amy go out to play by herself? MIA glanced at the counter, but didn't see Amy. She brought Hannah to play with Jessica. Meg smiled. Hannah had been drawing in the restaurant behind closed doors for a few days, and she finally finished it. She slept for the whole day and only woke up in the evening. Seeing how groggy she was, Meg got Amy to bring her out for a walk. Also, Anna asked me when Shirley would be back yesterday. Can you confirm where she went? MIA asked Meg in a low voice as she approached him. Meg glanced at Anna, who was holding the cash box in a daze, and nodded slightly. She's trapped in the wind forest. I'm trying to confirm her location. I'll bring her back when I find her. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.